All right. Hello and welcome to the Crack Down Season 2, Episode 7. Today we have Peter Dunn here to discuss all the issues that have been plaguing NA. There's been a lot of discussion in the community recently. I think it started with an Alfari interview, but a bunch of players have been interviewed and have discussed publicly about how there's been a big difference between Scrim culture in NA and the path towards improvement in NA compared to EU. And who better to talk about this than someone who literally coached in EU last season and is now coaching in NA. So how you doing, man? Are you ready to discuss some of these NA issues?
Yep, I'm always ready for discussing some coaching theory, Dom. So looking forward to it.
What was the gist of what, I saw part of the Alfari one, if you mean the interview you did with Travis. I know you were saying some, people dodging scrims based on the draft and stuff, which already sounds a bit alien to me. But what were the main points that he was bringing up that we wanted to address?
I mean, so not only is there people dodging scrims, but just the overall effort towards scrims is weird. And then also, I would say that outside of just dodging, people like leaving scrims way early on in the scrim, something goes bad and people are remaking. Well, I mean, people are remaking the scrim at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. One bad thing will happen, and they'll kind of aim for this should never happen, so we're not gonna practice the situation out because it's unrealistic. Okay. Where it's to me, I actually was somebody who dealt with the same thing as a player, but my viewpoint was always, well, if it did happen right now, then it is a realistic situation. We just played it out, and we got ourselves here. We should learn how to play out of it. So, I mean, I guess we can start just with overall scrim culture in NA and EU, and just,
let's do it.
What the differences are to you, because maybe you don't have the same opinion with all the rage quits and things like that, or draft remakes or whatever.
I mean, was Alfari suggesting this kind of thing didn't happen in EU?
Yeah, he was suggesting that it happens way more in NA than in EU.
Okay. In quantity, okay. Maybe that's something to discuss, but I mean, these kind of things happen in the EU too. I mean, these kind of things happen in China. They happen in Brazil.
They're the best teams do it as well. I'm not naming names, but a top team in LPL or LEC might do this as well.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, it's not something that I particularly enjoy. I will say that I've remade 2 scrims. One was a situation where, I mean, we'd scrim the first 4 games with one very OP champion that was always banned. Let's just call it Tryndamere. And Tryndamere was banned in the first 4 games, and then the enemy team didn't ban it, and we didn't pick it, and then they picked it, and I was like, oh, it's up. It's a Thursday. We're going to play tomorrow on stage. The champion's not going to be up, so let's remake the draft. Okay, you guys win this draft. Let's remake the draft, right? Because it was just something that I as a coach missed. The other example, I mean, how can I say this? Okay, I mean, I can't go into this without leaking something, but this is 6 weeks ago, so hopefully it's not going to be relevant for this weekend. But there's one game where somebody literally picks Nah, and then they flex it to bot lane in order to get a good matchup in top when it's the day before you're about to play LEC. LCS, sorry. And then at some point you just have to come and say, look, this is not giving us good practice. We have literally 2 games before we go on stage. And I think, remaking under those kind of circumstances is applicable. But I mean, given that I've been in NA, 3 months, I think it's happened maybe 2, maybe 3 times. But I think I don't think you should ever go into a situation where you should never remake. But, when it comes down to cheese picks, in EU, when you're scrimming against G2, if you're going to remake every single time they pull out a cheese drop, you're going to spend half of your time remaking scrims, right? So, I mean, definitely, maybe certain teams have experienced this more than others. I have definitely seen teams asking for remakes at 5 minutes, but what we normally do is just say no. And then they play the game out. I mean, then there's no remake.
One thing that Alfari mentioned specifically was just how the culture works in EU. So, for example, one thing that he said was, if you do decide to remake a draft, that just counts as a game played in EU. So, from what he said in the interview, it's okay, if you want to remake, then that's 1 game of the scrim set down. So if you have 5 games,
just forfeiting a game.
Yeah, it's you forfeit
exactly.
a game. Is that actually is that a concept here, or is that just a strictly EU thing, or did you not have the same formula, the same way that you went about scrims when you were within LEC teams?
I mean, I would say that Yeah, I mean in EU it was normally that, but normally you wouldn't like ask to remake unless you were literally like 10k gold down at 15 minutes, and then it's fine, right? Like if you're normally you play out until first Baron, and then you can surrender after first Baron. I mean that's generally the rule that I would put. But yeah, I think it does take up things. The big thing I've noticed actually in North America is that reviews take a lot longer than they do in EU.
That's
In
another thing you
EU,
mentioned.
like yeah, I've seen certain teams they do 45-minute reviews, and you know like
What?
I don't want to keep. I mean, as all the coaches at the start of the season kind of agreed that 25 minutes was going to be the accepted standard, and I think there's only like 3 teams in the league that stick to this. So that is weird.
Even that seems long. 25 minutes in between every single game, because that's like longer than half the games you're going to be playing.
Sure, but I mean, I can kind of understand, right? Because what I want to do in my reviews, I want to do group review and then one-to-one review, right? So I don't want to sit the players in the room for 25 minutes and discuss. Although I know that some teams do want to do that, and I'm not going to criticize that approach. But generally, like you need time to go over laning fundamentals. You need like 10 minutes at least, like 5 to 10 minutes. So I think that kind of thing can apply. What I would say, yeah, reviews take a lot longer, and that's a bit frustrating for me because as a coach, what I kind of want to do is I want my players to, we start scrims at 12, we finish scrims at 5. You have full high focus between these kinds of times. Then you have a more relaxed hour or so when you take dinner, and then 2 hours for your night block, right? If you're doing night blocks or one-to-ones or whatever you're doing on that night, and kind of asking for high intensity, like super high intensity for 6 hours is actually a lot different from asking for 5, right? And it's not that I'm saying players should only work for 5 hours a day. No, it's about keeping the high intensity that you kind of expect for 5 hours, and it's just harder. The longer things go, the harder it is to do that, and especially the longer the downtime, right? So if you're doing a 25-minute review and another team's doing a 45-minute review, it can be really, really hard to kind of get people to refocus, right? And
Yeah.
I would say that that's the biggest issue that I've seen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say that just completely breaks your focus, right? If you're just sitting in front of your computer for 15 minutes and like you're done with your review, you're waiting for the enemy team to review, and then you're suddenly like going on Reddit, you're going on YouTube, you're like watching a fucking Twitch stream or something. Like if that's what happens during a scrim block, which is like, I don't know like what rules are in place now, but like if that's what's happening during a scrim block, like, yeah, I mean, obviously your focus isn't going to be great. I mean, is that still a thing in NA? Because I remember like, we always struggled with that on teams that I was on, where people would be allowed to like go on Twitter, go on Reddit, whatever, like after the review. Like, is that a thing?
So the thing with my players is I don't think they use Twitter that much. So I think they're more going on, like for instance Jizuke, whenever he has downtime, he's just watching Chovy and Showmaker. That's all he does. He just watches their like stream highlights. But it's really so if you could get a guarantee, like in a perfect world, in the 5 hours where you're supposed to be high intensity, I would prefer it if they never went on Twitter or Reddit or something like this, right? But if the other team risks, if they're sitting there for 20 minutes not doing anything,
yeah, what are you gonna do?
Well, what are you gonna do, right? So, but what I found, maybe it's because I've got a team of veterans this year, is that the distraction isn't really there. I mean, with somebody like kha'zix, who's very active on social media and this kind of thing, and he was more kind of somebody who would go on social media, and he would be able to refocus for the next game. If he wasn't able to do this, we would have just said no social media for you. But with the kind of the roster that I've got this year, they normally spend a lot of time on YouTube, but they're generally just watching matchups or getting one-to-one focus. So it's not too bad. Maybe it's an EG specific thing. Maybe it's because we have 5 veterans. But generally they're not doing that. So.
So in your like personal opinion, would you say that there's like that the difference in scrims is like being overstated as one of the reasons why NA is failing? Is that like not the main thing that your mind goes to when the whole topic of like why NA is worse than EU becomes like something that's relevant?
For sure. I mean, and I mean, there's a lot of people on social media and various kind of things that have this idealized idea of how things work in Europe and how things work in China. I don't know Korea, so maybe things are idealized. Maybe it is like a scrim utopia in Korea, right? But I just have no inside knowledge. But they have this idea that the reason why NA teams are bad is because they don't take scrim seriously. Their players are lazy. They don't care about winning. They're not willing to sacrifice in order to get to the top. And having gone through scrims in different regions, it's not as dissimilar as you think it is, right? Like, I mean, and by kind of going to these steps where you go and blame scrim culture, or you go and blame culture, or you go and target individual players, or you go and say players are lazy and that kind of thing, it kind of gives you an excuse which says, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, we could never succeed in the first place, right? Where rather than kind of fixing the fundamental underlying issues with how things are run, you know, how talent is developed, how SoloQ environment is developed, and if you go and blame scrims, then it's very easy to have this as saying, you know, we never had the potential to be successful in the first place, so why bother, right? And that's kind of how I see it. I'm not going to say that there are no issues. I'm not going to say NA scrim culture is better than Europe, right? It's worse for sure, but it's not like the gap is nowhere near as bad as some people are saying, right? And sure, people do ask to remake, but you don't have to give them a remake, right?
To me, the whole trouble with that entire topic, which you've kind of like almost like danced around, but you were sort of implying it there, is like, it's just a very, very popular sentiment on Reddit of like, here's another reason why NA sucks in the current world. It's always contrasted with LEC because LEC feels within touch. It's also like people of European origin playing the game. So people feel like that's more attainable than if you say like LCK does, you know, something this way, they go, well, fuck. We're nothing like Koreans, so we've got no chance, right? So I feel like it's just too popular a way for people to like bag on NA, really, because as you say, a lot of these issues, like, even if they're not as extreme, that still exists in Europe. And like 3 years ago, when some of the same things existed in European scrim culture, because we couldn't have won Worlds then, would that have made that the wrong culture? But now it's suddenly the right culture because G2 can win Worlds. By the way, there's one thing we've got to stop in League of Legends in general. I've said this every single time for the last 2 years. Please stop making out like G2 is LEC. They're not in any way. If the second best team in fucking LEC for the last 2 years was Fnatic and they were nowhere close to winning Worlds, can we just stop with this whole thing that like Europe's cracked the fucking code and like we are the region? Like, first of all, there's no we. It's 5 fucking people who play for G2 and then whatever G2's coaching staff does, and in that scenario we're only just trying to see if they've got another 5 that can do it. So people already have like pushed those narratives, like they've gotten out of control. Those narratives have like gone beyond even what the people who made them intended and become like rampaging Godzilla like monsters, just destroying all reasonable discourse otherwise. Because that's one thing I always found very tough is like when we set that up at the beginning about like, do they dodge the scrim? Or that's weird. Why do they quit a scrim where that might happen in a game? Like, it's not as easy as people think that there's a right or wrong answer with that. Because I can tell you, for example, I know back in games like StarCraft, Koreans used to have super insane rules like that. Like if they were playing like a basic matchup and someone sent like the probe, and when you fuck with the other guy's probes, and when you're scouting his base, say you just do like a fancy micro trick and you kill one that would normally never happen, they would just remake the whole game. They would be like, right, well, if that happened in a real game, you'd be so far behind, like 10% off your production value. They would just restart the whole game and go, that's not how we're ever going to practice. So you can't tell them they're wrong, by the way. They were the best to ever play the game. It was StarCraft. Like, the point is, like, to me, it's more like what methods work for like your region. I don't think there's like a meta method. Like, for example, I always say this. In my opinion, the problem with looking to Korean esports in an idealized manner is, in my opinion, that's a culture which said, I don't give a fuck about any of the human beings who play the game. Throw as many bodies at the wall as you need until you get the best player to ever play the game. I would never design a structure like that. Like, I don't give a fuck if I don't get to win. I would never put people through that. So, in my opinion, you've got to reverse engineer your own system. You can't just look at whoever the best is. Come on.
Sure. And I mean, to give an example, so I will say in Alfari's defense, Origin always played out, right? It didn't matter like how bad things were. They always did play out. I'm not going to say all teams in Europe, but maybe I can give like a side story, right? So there was a top European team. I'm not going to call out which team it was, but a top European team. We were doing a scrim with them with Splice in 2019, and they did a level 1, and we've stacked 5 people in the bush, and it failed, right? They asked for a remake. We're okay, like fine. Your level 1 didn't work. You know, you guys need to snowball. Fine, you can have your remake. They did the exact same level 1 again, and died in exactly the same way again. Third time they asked for it. They did the same level 1, died in exactly the same way again. And we refused them to remake the third time, and they literally ran it down. Like for 8 minutes, they literally just ran the entire game down. And I
reckon I could guess this too. I reckon I could guess this easy. Come on.
Were they typing things in all chat while they were running it down, or like how'd it go?
No, but they did that. And then in the fourth, and then the next time they were on red side, they did the exact same level 1, and this time This time it worked because we were like, they're not going to do this level 1 again, right? Like they've done it 3 times, and then we asked for a remake, and they were like, no, play it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like to see somebody then go and say who's played in Europe and has almost certainly scrimmed this. I mean, yeah, Alfari has definitely scrimmed this team. He's always been on top teams, right? Like he's definitely scrimmed this team, and he's definitely seen this kind of behavior. Like I mean, you can't then go and say that NA is necessarily worse. Like it's like individual teams, right? Individual teams in individual regions, right? I don't want to say that all LPL teams run it down. There are some LPL teams that have really, really structured scrims. They're never late. They'll show up on time. They'll take things seriously. And there's some that will just, I mean, they will limit test, right? And
by the way, on the specifics of the draft thing, I want to ask about that. Like, because obviously, again, it's too vague to say like dodging a draft, right? You gave an example of one which I think would be entirely fair. Like, if I'm the night before LEC, my practice is for what I'm going to play in LEC, and as you say, someone does a mad like fucking support NAR or something, and it's like there's no way the team I'm playing is going to do it. Like, I agree. In that scenario, I might be like, look, for the sake of my practice, like, there's no point me playing this game out. But if we're talking about a scenario where it's a draft that could well come up, it's the way that you yourself are drafting and they just happen to pick a champion you don't like. To me, there is something where it's like, you've got to play some of those games. Like, how do you, do you have like any sort of hard and fast rules roughly as to how you do this sort of thing? What's reasonable to you?
So Tuesday is the first day of scrims. Like, you can do whatever you want on a Tuesday. Like on a Tuesday, you want to go play a Mumu mid lane, like we'll play the game out if you play a Mumu mid lane, right? I don't want you to play a Mumu mid lane, but maybe you found something completely broken that we haven't spotted, and then fine, we play it out, right? Wednesday is a bit more on the edge. Normally the way that if one team wins 3 games, normally they get a lot more freedom. Just I don't know how it works, but as a coach, I've noticed that coaches are a lot more willing to experiment when they've won 3 times, because it's normally a 5 block, and then you just kind of let them experiment a bit, right? But I mean, normally Tuesday and Wednesday, the earlier on in the week it is, the more you should do it. And on Thursday, like if people can do cheese, there's no problem doing cheese, right? You want to, I don't know, I'm about to play a really important weekend, so I can't go into it. But you want to pull your cheese counter pick out 5th pick against like something that we play standard on stage, go ahead, right? But if you want to like really mess things up, then we'll remake the draft, right? Like, but it has to be something like literally like putting your NAR support or something like that, right? It's not like a cheese counter pick or something like this. Like a cheese counter pick is okay, right? But not something where you like ruin the entire team composition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue that I would bring up with this is like, you say like, oh, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday it's acceptable, on a Thursday not so much, but like there's only 3 days of scrims in NA, right? So like you have the 3 days of LCS, then you have break day on Monday, then you have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So you don't have that many scrims to actually like solidify your plans and everything. So how do you go about like managing such a low amount of scrims and then to turn over quickly into LCS? Because it seems like there's just not enough time.
I mean, I think this is a major issue. I mean, I'll be clear. Like, I didn't know this coming into this season, but having 3 days of scrims is insane, right? Because
it's nothing.
People will say, but people will say, oh, you should just scrim on the days you play. Like, you're playing a high intensity game that can really matter. Like, you can't scrim on that day. Maybe you can do warm-ups, but the problem is that in North America, on the West Coast, games start at 12 o'clock. It's not like in EU where you're playing like in EU, we would always do warm-ups, right? Because your game started at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., right? So you could just do 2 games at 2 o'clock and it's fine, right? But in NA, the players are normally scrimming at 12 to 5, and the games are normally 12 to 5. I can't get my players into the office at 9 a.m. on a game day. It's not that they're lazy. It's just that,
it's not enough
it's going to throw off their pattern, right? It's going to throw off their pattern. And that makes warm-ups impossible. Can you do like cooldowns? I don't know what you would call them, like after games, sure. But those games are not going to be as good if you've just lost.
Might tilt them for the next day. I know that's like something that people say.
I mean, if you've won, it's probably easy, but I can't predict whether I'm going to win, right?
If you lose and then you go and you play your academy team in like cooldowns or whatever, and then suddenly you lose like a fucking set to your academy team, and then you go into the next day, how do you have any confidence? You're just going to get shit on. So.
Like I don't have a good solution for this. I think teams are still working out what we're going to do, because I don't think I've ever seen a region have so little time to scrim. This was the same in Proving Grounds, by the way, for in the amateur system, right? In the amateur system, I had a team they played a best of 5 in the finals where it went to 5 games. All of the games went super long on the Sunday, and then on Monday they had to play a best of one. In their group stage the next day. And I think the schedule is very, very packed, and there's a lot of League of Legends going. And it's complicated, right? For how to fix it. I'm not sure what the answer is yet. Maybe it's simply a case of, you put the academy team in for one weekend so that you can get like a longer period of like a mini in the middle of a season boot camp, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of a season. But we're still working it out, and I think most teams don't have a solution right now. But we'll see how things develop, right, as the season goes on. But it's definitely odd. It's definitely odd having so free scrims.
Well, I mean, you've alluded to it already that you guys have started doing night blocks at least recently.
Yeah.
Is that something that like you're only doing now because it's crunch time? Or is it something that you've like kind of adapted? You're like, hey, if this was like in the middle of a season, I would like going into next split, for example, you want to start doing like night blocks on the 3 days of scrims, because like I feel like that's like something else needs to be done. 15 games of practice per week is actually insanely low. I mean, 15 games of practice is nothing. I mean, if you look back in like season 4, season 5, people. So the whole scrim culture was kind of dictated by TSM because TSM was like stomping the entire region. And what they would do is they would do triple block every single day. So it would be noon to 3, break for an hour, 4 to 7, break for an hour, and then 8 to 10. So it'd be like a 2-game third set. It'd be like a two-game third set, and then 3 games for the first 2 sets. And they would do no break day too. So like if you think about the amount of practice they're getting, like they're getting 8 games per day, and they're doing it 5 days a week. So they're getting 40 games like every single week of practice, and now we're only getting like 15. It seems so alien. Like I'm not saying that teams should have no break day and triple block every single day, but I feel like this approach has to be good from EG to like start doing night blocks. I heard CLG is starting to do night blocks. I feel like this adaptation needed to be made, but I mean it's just kind of strange that it took until now, or maybe it's the type of thing where people don't want to be doing it in the early season. Like, do you have any take on the effectiveness of them?
I mean, I will say CLG was streaming Mondays when Boxer came, so they didn't have an off day in the week, which is.
And look at their, but look at their improvement. Look at how much better they got.
I mean, it's fair. What I will say is that there's 2 kinds of modes that you need to be in, right? There's kind of improvement mode and sustain mode, right? And you can't be in improvement mode for the entire year, right? Like it just doesn't work. You will burn yourself out.
Burn out.
And in League where we have constant play for long periods of time, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? Like in other games, like CS, right? There's individual tournaments, and you have that kind of enforced downtime, and you can choose what you want to do in that enforced downtime, right? But I think that normally you should kind of have the majority of the season should be about just maintaining your level and not dropping off, and then you have like short bursts, and that doesn't just mean come to playoffs. It can mean midway through the season, but you can't be on burst mode every single week. And with the structure that we have right now, it's not immediately obvious to me what the solution is. I can just say in EU last year, like Mad Lions, sometimes we would scrim 3 days a week, and sometimes we would scrim 4 days a week, but we would always do warm-ups, right, on game day, so that we would make sure that we had a set number of scrims. But it kind of depends, and there's not that much time, right, to work things out, because this week was only a 6-week season, right? So I think teams are still working out. We have, the entire split is going to be, there's going to be 45 games in the season, so I suspect that you'll see teams maybe use their academy teams more. I can't imagine that teams are going to scrim 4 days for multiple weeks. So it remains to be seen. But this is a balancing act. Nobody's kind of gone through this before, so we're all kind of experimenting and working things out on the fly. Yeah, I will say that CLG, they had impetus from Boxer coming in, right? So it's a new environment, new situation, and therefore everyone's really motivated to go more and go really, really hard, right? But I don't think they've been able to do this from the start of lock-in until now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess the question then would be like, how do you decide when to go into like the burst mode, as you called it? Because I feel like what a lot of teams end up doing is they go into that burst mode only when they start losing games, right? So they go on a massive losing streak. People are already fucking tilted, and then they just go into like burst mode, and then they're just like overworking while being like extremely negative and it just like spirals downwards. So the whole question is like, how do you like, is there other things that you can use to, you know, like decide when you go into Brisbane? I mean, obviously you want to be doing this on the patch that like this week makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're going to be on the playoffs patch. So yeah, I mean, obviously you want to be as good as possible on the patch that you're going to be playing your highest intensity matches on. But like, what about besides for that? Like, how else do you determine when to go into this like high improvement mode?
I think you just have to set aside time for it at the start of the year, right? Like, just acknowledge that these weeks are the weeks where we're going to go, and then keep to the schedule. It's really like, I would love to say that there's a be all and end all solution, but it really comes down to what your team environment's like, what your players are like, and judging things on the fly, right? Because maybe you're planning to go into burst mode next week, but everyone looks like they're on their last legs, right? Then you just can't do it, right? Maybe you give an extra day, maybe you give an easier scrim block. You know, like we've scrimmed amateur teams, right? In order to test fundamentals, right? Like you can go into burst mode, you can go into improvement mode without necessarily scrimming the best teams every single week, right? But that means that you have to acknowledge, like, if your week is set aside as an improvement week and you're scrimming bad teams, and those teams are and then your players start messing around. Again, not saying EG players are doing this, but if they start messing around and you've said we're dedicating this to improvement, then you go really hard, right? You go and say something like, you know, this play that we did it 2 waves late, right? So therefore, like, this is something really, really bad, and therefore go really, really hard and say, you have the opportunity, you have control over the game, so play it as optimally as you possibly can. Whereas maybe say you're scrimming C9 or TL or something like this, right? Not everything is going to be optimal all the time, right? Because they're putting a ton of pressure on you, and the games are going to be much closer, right? So what you go and highlight and what you go and push on is the big thing. And there are ways you can do it, there are ways around it. But again, you know, I've only been in the US for 3 weeks now, and it's been working remote, and this is a new structure. So again, we still have to work it out.
I feel like that whole topic is one that's really misunderstood by people, because when you hear people, especially Western players, complain about not being able to play like Koreans and play against the highest scrim culture, all they're essentially saying, if you could translate what they were saying into the terminology of coaching, is, I don't want to have to myself practice with purpose, just make the players way better than me so that I have no choice, that I wouldn't be able to win the game unless I practiced like a very specific way, focused on everything, focused on my laning, focused on my timing, my rotations. What all you're saying there is, it's like if I'm on my own during a lockdown, right? Is it impossible for me to work out? Of course not. I could design an amazing workout. There's a million workouts on the internet. But you know, if I had a personal trainer come every day, it'd feel easy. Even though the work would be harder, it would feel easier because he's going to make me do it. So basically, one of the areas I've always thought was incredibly whack when I hear about like Europeans, especially, go and complain about LCS, is where they make it sound like, oh, and the scrim practices were like really bad. So like, well, we got worse. It's like, wait a minute, where did the excuse come for you to play like shit in a scrim because they played like shit? Like, if people don't know, by the way, the premise that you have to practice against like the best opposition to be the best, like, that's like fucking level 1 thinking. Like, I can tell you there's even a really good Counter-Strike example for this, which is about 5 years ago, the best North American teams were nowhere near the European teams. Like, let's say Europe had like, you know, the top 5 teams were all European, then maybe the best North American team was like 6th and they were never going to win the big tournament, right? And this team from Brazil came and moved to North America because it was the obvious place to move to get the visas and stuff, and they played in the North American region, and they became the #1 team in the world and won the world championship twice in that year, because we had 2 back in CS back in the day. Majors, right? And if people don't know, one of the things they overtly said that they did was, one, they put way more time into theory than they did raw scrim results, because they knew the scrims weren't that good. So why not spend an hour going over like our philosophy of the game and here's what we would want. But then secondly, what they did was, no joke, now listen, they were doing it online versus offline, but the same premise is going to apply. They said when they played the scrim game, they wouldn't go for some like easy thing that you could do where you could destroy this opponent because they were too bad, or it was an online game, so you know, like the ping would be too high for the guy to take a fight. They wouldn't cheat, essentially. They wouldn't give themselves an out. They would play as if it was a serious, proper game that they were playing against the best team in the world and this is on LAN. And that all sounds to a fan like, come on, you're going too far with all this stuff. And I always think, like, why do you guys read those newspaper stories where it's about, like, you know, how some amazing athlete visualizes something? If to you it's a movie, like, that's real. Like, they do that shit because it can actually help you.
Sure. I will say this is a lot easier for veterans to do than rookies. I would
Sure,
say
of
that
course.
kind of looking back at Mad Lions Worlds, it was much easier for Mad Lions to get good practice against like a Korean or a Chinese team than it was against an emerging region team, right? And this is something that
Is that why you
if
guys
you are
lost in play-ins? Because the teams were
well,
just too bad. You couldn't focus. Just joking, obviously, but you can answer if you want. Oh, I think he lost the sound for a second.
Someone at EG pressed the button, they hit the kill switch.
Oh goddamn! The Mad Lions roast and the
There you
headset
go.
just instantly died. Unlucky.
Exactly. There you go.
It's great timing for it.
hello, sorry about that. I unplugged my headset. Sorry about that. No, but I mean, it's natural, like that a rook. Sorry to interrupt, but it's natural that the longer you've been playing, you've gone and seen everything before. You've played against all the best players, right? It's natural that you're going to be more. The difference is not going to be as much, right? Whereas if it's your first international tournament, you go. The people you want to play against, well, Rookie wasn't at Worlds last year, right? But like you want to test yourself against the fakers of the world. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, he wasn't at the Worlds. Okay, all right, man.
But you want the showmakers. You want to scrim against the showmakers and the chovies of the world. And it's natural that you're just going to have more of a motivation. And actually, this is one of the hardest things to do as a coach, right? And this was why it was so hard. The quarantine situation at Worlds last year, right? Because trying to motivate players, especially young players, when you're scrimming against players that they think that they're worse than, and maybe these are guys that they've played at proving grounds or whatever the amateur circuit is, and they've beaten these guys and they smashed these guys in the past, and now they're in LCS. You have this idea, I've come to LCS, I'm going to play against Jensen, I'm going to play against Power of Evil, right? And now I have to go and play against some amateur team, right? Like, why did I spend all of my time working my way up just to go and scrim against this amateur team, right? And that's something which is really hard to do as a coach, but sometimes you need to learn your fundamentals against worse teams, right? And you test your fundamentals against better teams, right? And that's something which is hard to do, right? But it's important that you do it. And again, all I can say is that at EG, like we managed to get good practice against much weaker teams. Maybe our practice against the stronger teams is a bit mixed, but that's because people are limit testing a lot more. So I don't mind that. I don't mind that too much.
Do you have any philosophy when it comes to like how you divide up getting good teams and or like good teams and then like I guess like amateur and like academy teams in a week of scrims? Because like for example, one of the teams that I used to scrim against all the time was Cloud9, and they had a very like strict mentality where they wouldn't triple block with good teams. When they would triple block, they'd make sure that like the team the team that they would play at the end of the day would be like a weaker team, so they didn't get demoralized going into the week. Because if you're playing against, let's say you're playing against TLC9 every single day and you just get fucking destroyed, you get shit on for an entire week, it's so hard to have confidence. Do you think that like that has any value, or do you just want to be like scrimming like high quality opponents as much as possible?
I think scrimming high quality opponents is important, but it's more a case of how stable teams are, right? Like you don't want to have a whole week where all you're doing is scrimming against stable teams, or all you're doing is scrimming against, I don't want to call them unstable,
High variance.
High variance. Thank you.
That's actually perfect.
That's actually perfect, right? Right. So sometimes you need a mixture in both, and then you need a mixture in terms of days which are for learning and days which are for testing, right? And maybe we're a team that scrims really well and does really well against high variance teams. Okay, then you can use your high variance day for learning new things, right? But maybe if you're a team that isn't so good against stable teams, then either you use that as a testing day, or you book a stable team, which is maybe lower down the table, right? So one team I can give an example of this was Rogue back in 2019 before they promoted Larson and Inspired and all this, like the bottom team in the league. But they were an extremely stable team, really good scrim partners. Would take all the games really, really seriously, and we got really good scrim practice with them. We scrimmed them a lot, even though we were like one of the we could swim G2 or Fnatic or whoever we wanted, right? And we made sure to book them pretty much every week, because we would use that as like a a stable day, and we could learn things and we could improve on that day. Whereas,
also, I'm sure it goes without saying, like, the fact that they're stable also makes them like a barometer, so you can see how you're improving and changing week to week. I'm sure that helps as well, right? Yeah.
Exactly right, and I'm sure they gained a lot from scrimming us as well, because they got better over the course. But for instance, maybe Vitality and Fnatic were both kind of unstable teams, which you can see from their play, right? Like they like to play really aggressive and things like this. So you wouldn't book both of them in the same week, right? If you only had like
now you're coaching one of those unstable players. So like how is that going?
Who says that Jizuki? Actually, I think that this has been really oversold. So leaving aside the Dignitas series, the Dignitas one where he double dived, solution, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I remember that one.
Well, yeah, I remember that one too. But I think Jizuka has actually become a lot more stable this year, right? Like the times where he's dying in the side lane, he is. It's always in a situation where the team can cross map. And sure, he has some deaths which are really not the best. But you compare Jizuka this year to Jizuka last year, and the difference is really clear, right? Like, I mean, normally, sometimes he would have games where he just dies on the side lane 3 times, right, in the same game, and then the team completely loses, right? Whereas you compare it to Cloud9, and sure, they caught him in the side lane once, but they only caught him once, and they were trying for the entire series. And there was one situation where they caught him, and they TP'd on him, and we took 2 towers. We took 2 towers and denied 3 minion waves, and all they got from their TP was a kill.
Yeah, I mean, I would say...
People are like, oh, Jizuke is inting again. No, he's not, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of Jizuke's deaths that I feel like have been bad this year have been the ones like in lane phase, like just dying to ganks that he shouldn't be dying to. Like I'd say that like his side laning has been fine, but like he just dies to ganks that it's like, this shouldn't work here. Like, this is like an illegal gank to die to. But I mean that's a completely different point. I think that kind of ties into something else that I wanted to ask though. Which is, it's in the community a lot. People don't understand why veteran players look so good in EU, and then when they come to NA, like the macro seems to just be completely gone. Like a lot of the things that like for example, we had a conversation last weekend where we were talking about chokes and vision control right before I released that video. It was actually the inspiration for that series was a conversation with Peter Dunn where I was just talking about this like the lack of choke control and how people are just walking into dragons for free, right? So when you have like a team of veterans, all your players have seemed capable and have been on really good teams. But then when you watch like EG play together, it seems like something about like the fact that these players are now playing in NA, it's like they lose that edge. Why do you think that like those types of decisions, even amongst veterans that come to NA, are just like not being carried out?
Okay, so there's a lot of nuance to this question, right? But let's break it down into 2 things, like macro and team fighting, right? So if you want to be one of the best players in EU, let's say you're support and you want to be one of the best players in EU, or you're a top laner, you have to play on the edge all of the time, right? And that kind of means cheating in situations, cheating on tempo, right? The whole of League, like if you go past so you have to understand the basic fundamentals of League, right? That's the baseline. If you don't pass the baseline, then you don't get to innovate more, right? But once you get past that basic baseline, the more you can cheat on tempo without being called out, the better it is for you, right? Like you can get a small advantage, and the enemy team should respect because you're not showing
because of the like unknown, because of the
exploiting the gaps where people wouldn't be.
Exactly, right? Yes. And a good team will respect those gaps a lot more than a bad team will, right? Like I mean, a bad team, they see one person, they see 0 people on the map and 1 person on the side lane, and they say, okay, let's send 3 people top, right? When you could easily just have 3 people top or 4 people top and just kill them, right? So you want to cheat as much as you possibly can to get to the top, and you don't get to the top if you never cheat.
You never coached Huan Feng by any chance? Just throwing that out there. just like he might have taken this too far in one direction. Sure. I'm just saying.
I mean, I don't know how many of your watchers, your viewers, watch LPLs, and I assume you mean this purely on in-game stuff.
Yes.
I know nothing about the outside life of players.
Yes, no, that's what I meant. Purely in-game. I like to keep everything in-game. That's one thing about my broadcast.
Sure.
So.
But play like the only player that I can think in Europe that gets by on pure fundamentals who never cheats is kind of Larson, and Larson's trying to add that a bit more into his game. Like if you compare how he played this year compared to last year, like
he was cheating hard when he was trying to pressure with no mana there. That was a fucking massive bluff in the Zero Illusion.
Sure, but all of the best players, you never look like a good player in Europe if you never try to take these advantages, right? And if they come to North America, firstly their teammates don't. Firstly, teams will just call them out much more, right? Like, this is something where we had Mystiques, who's playing in our academy team, and he came in, and he was just like a situation where they have no vision on all of us. We have full vision control over the dragon. We have 3 people taking dragon, and he's going to top side because he's already anticipating the next play, right? Because they have no control over dragon. We have full vision, we have full control, and obviously they're going to just trade the dragon for the top tier 1, right? So he's already heading off to top tier 1 to kind of preemptively defend the dive, and then like 4 people out, and one of their players is dead, right? So even if they fight, it's a 4v5, and then they just hard engage onto dragon 4v5 with no vision, and in the review, some of his teammates, who in fairness, they're rookies, in academy, and they're still developing, they're like, Mystiques, why are you going top here? Shouldn't you be here with us on dragon? And he's like, there's no way that they're going to fight this dragon. And then they're like, oh, but look, they did. And it's kind of this kind of thing. You have to, it's hard to try to get and tell a player that the things which have made them so strong in Europe no longer apply in North America, right? And I think this is one thing.
So NA teams play so bad that it's good, is what you're telling me.
Well, I mean, we'll come to that.
The thing is, though, the logic makes sense. I'll give you a very, very quick example. Again, I'll contrast it to Counter-Strike if anyone's watching at the moment. One of the teams that did very, very well in Counter-Strike recently and like kind of shocked the world by making it to the final of this IEM was a team where one of the players is a very aggressive player, and he was doing exactly what Peter's talking about, which is because the other top teams, the meta of how you play Counter-Strike, there are certain spots you don't just take like naked with no utility, as it were. You have someone flashbang you in, or you go with a partner, so if you die, he can trade for you. Right? This guy just exploited all these little holes against the top teams because he knew, like, oh, they won't do that. So basically, he was just getting like free kills where he would just be there at a time you wouldn't expect, or again, without using anything himself. And when it worked, obviously it looked fucking amazing. But the premise was like, mate, that has like a short-term lifespan on it. And in fact, the fact that you're playing against top teams is what's making it work really well. If you play a bad team who doesn't even understand the basic meta, they might just punish you by just being worse.
Yeah, they're just holding the corners.
Yeah, they'll just be in a worse position. Yeah, or they'll just be like over-focused on something that never would happen. So, like, I know that's basically he's actually been able to answer what I've tried to ask a million guests so far, which is I don't believe, I'm sorry, that Featherman can be amazing in Europe, then go to NA and just be average. Like that's not the case. He's playing a different game than he's playing in Europe. Something like essentially what he's doing that would actually make him succeed is now making him fail in theory, a weaker region, which is kind of what you're getting at here, right? The meta of how they play.
Yeah, and it can also be things like, the default is kind of to defend your player, right? So if a player, like, let's say Jizuke, although I don't think it, like, let's say 2020 Jizuke, right, is hard aggressively forcing on one side of the map, and then the other team comes and kills him, right? Yeah. Then you have the choice. Do you try to defend him, or do you try to take something else, right, on the other side of the map?
Yeah, do you cross map?
And if all you're trying to do is defend him when he's playing really aggressive, maybe he's playing really aggressive because he wants 4 people to come around and chase him and kill him, right? So he's creating space for you somewhere else that you have to kind of exploit. And if you come and try to defend him, well, now they've killed him, and now you're stuck in a 5v4, and maybe you don't all die. Maybe you just get aced and you lose the game, right? But maybe instead they just push you out 5v4, and now they have complete control over the other side of the map, right? When you should have had that control. It's a bit difficult, without like crosses, without a whiteboard and X's and O's, and this is things that coaches don't really talk about in detail, right? Because we want to keep our competitive advantage. So I'm not going to go in too much detail on it, but like these kind of things make it harder for a player to make the transition. Okay, so that's the macro stuff.
But I mean, what I would counter that with would be like, don't you believe that like being a truly great player is being adaptable to all these situations and like and having enough game understanding to like be able to realize, like, if let's take this example, right? When you're in the side lane, being able to like realize where your team is positioned and like what they can possibly like take cross map if you are like gonna get caught in the side lane. Because I feel like what ends up happening is a lot of players like they'll they'll do like the right play, or they'll do the play where it's like, oh, like he should be able to, like, it should be bad theoretically if 4 people go bottom and kill this person, right? Yep. But they don't actually factor in what their team is doing, where people are positioned, if people base at bad times. So like, that's like my issue is it feels like they almost, it's like they have the blinders on. They're like, no, I'm pushing in the silent because that's good. They can't come 3 people bottom because it's 25 minutes and Baron's up. Like they kind of view it in a vacuum instead of being like adaptable to what's actually happening on the map.
Sure, but imagine that those 4 players, your 4 teammates in that position, say you were on G2, right? Like, and those 4 players, if this situation happened to G2, if they were standing in the positions they were in, they were going to cross map, right? But if you're playing for another team, I don't want to call out a North American, but you're playing for like a North American team, and those players are standing in the exact same positions that the G2 members are, right? Or maybe they're standing even further to the other side of the map, right?
Yeah.
And then you go for that aggressive play, and you're like, oh, they're obviously going to cross map here, and then they don't, right? And then you second guess, right? Because these are the things which have made you a top player, right? You know, the thing which makes Bwipo a top player is that he has flexibility, right, in his style. He's going to go aggressive, but he doesn't go aggressive on every single wave, right? If you go aggressive every single time, you're not bluffing, you're inting, right? But he goes aggressive at exactly the right percentage of the time that you know, sometimes when people try to call him out for it, he's not actually bluffing, and they can punish, right? But you have to be able to do both. You can't just bluff all the time, right? But imagine that your ability to bluff, or your ability to play on the edge, is what makes you a great player. And then you come to a different region, and then you can't bluff anymore, right? And that's like a massive part of your skill set. Then it makes you begin to doubt other parts of your skill set as well, right? It's like, like you come here, you think, oh, I'm this insane player, I'm just going to destroy this guy. And then you don't destroy the guy, right? Because he doesn't respect you as much, or he doesn't know about your style, or maybe he's not even able to respect the thing that you're trying to do, right? I mean, you saw this, maybe, I don't know if you saw the Perks game where he's on Irelia into Azir, and he almost dies level 1, right? Because he's going for this play.
I mean, but I just feel like that, like, so on one side you can be like, oh, it's kind of a bluff or something like that, but just when I rationalize it out, it just looks like bad laning from Perks there. It's like, okay,
sure. Yep.
Well, I mean, were you gonna like contextualize it different? Because for me, it's like, you can say all you want about like, oh, the Irelia versus Azir matchup and him like being able to like fake pressure, but like at the end of the day, it's like, you need that extra minion to hit level 2 to have any chance of winning that.
Of course. But I'm saying that, like, maybe if Perks was playing against an EU mid laner who he's played against so much in the past, you know, and he hasn't bluffed as much in the past against this guy, and this guy knows his kind of style, and he knows that Perks is gonna, like, if Perks is playing aggressive here, he definitely has backup and things like this, and then he does it against some guy he's never played against before. This guy doesn't respect him in the same way, he doesn't play against him in the same way, and I'm sure that if Perks plays Irelia versus Azir, he's not going to do that same bluff again, right? But it takes time to adapt, right? So I'm not defending what Perks did, right? Like, obviously it was bad. Obviously he nearly died level 1. It would have been very funny if he died level 1, but he didn't die, and then he ended up getting the kill later, right? But
yeah, because the Azir wall, like, oh no, I'm sorry. There's apparently you can Q and dodge ability. Like, I hated that whole like discussion about, oh, like the Irelia Q can technically dodge like an ability in 1 frame. Like, it's not supposed to fucking work like that. Like, it's supposed to be a Perks death.
Sure. It's not supposed to, and there were issues about it, right? But you know, these kind of things you will see with any great player, right? Like, I'm sure if, okay, so Chovy plays really, really standard. Showmaker. If Showmaker came to NA, Showmaker wouldn't instantly be as insane as people say. Like, he would be good, and probably by the end of the year, he would be like by a mile the best mid laner, right? But he wouldn't start, like, I'm sure he would solo die, like in one of
for sure, yeah.
Like, I don't know to how many people. I'm not saying it would happen with every.
He solo died at versus PSG, right? Like, yeah,
exactly.
He died in the Syndra Echo matchup or something.
Yeah. I mean, this happened actually. Even let's leave Showmaker aside. This happened at Asia Games where Faker was playing into Saudi Arabia. It was like Korea versus Saudi Arabia, and Faker just died like level 2 or 3 to Katarina, and this guy is like not even you know, from a major region. He's never even played pro before, and he's just there playing in Asia, and Korea won in like 17 minutes or something, right? Like, it wasn't a close game, but they gave up first blood because Faker went all in on this guy, like semi bluffing, and the guy just like all in him and killed him. He was on Katarina. I remember the Saudi Arabian guy was on Katarina. But like, you know, these kind of things, they will happen, right? And sure, I mean, a good player is able to adapt and develop, but sometimes you just need somebody there to tell you, you know, this is not the right way to play against the people you're playing against, right? And it makes it really hard. For instance, I'm going to mention a guy like Mystiques, right? Because this issue is more obvious in Academy, but like sometimes I have to go and tell Mystiques, sure, what you're doing is maybe right in Europe, but don't do this in North America, right? Just play it standard and don't try to bluff. But at the same time, you have to keep the player improving, because if they want to compete against the top teams internationally, or they want to compete against the top teams in LCS, they will have to do these kind of things. They will have to be able to bluff. Right?
See, this is how complicated it is, Dom, because what happens is not only does Peter have to train all the players, he then has to debrief them before Worlds. Like, right, I'm going to make you forget everything you learned in NA. And here's real League of Legends, like cramming in. He's doing like fucking sessions, waking up in the middle of the night after 2 hours sleep, throwing cold water in their face. Guantanamo Bay, basically. That's the boot camp from now on.
Jesus, man. Yeah,
But that's all macro, right? But the team fighting thing is different, right? Because it's synergy with your own team, right? And I mean, Kobe at TSM is a really good example of this, right? Like, because Kobe is a fantastic team fighter in Europe, but in Europe he's used to having people create space for him
and peel for him, and like know that he exists and realize that they have an AD carry in the game. All those things.
Sure. Exactly, right? And like this is something he just didn't get at TSM, right? Like the people who are supposed to peel for him at TSM were Bifrost, Dardoch, and
Dardoch would literally EQ ulti max range on Jarvan every game in Suicide. That was literally like the engage to every single fight, and then suddenly like Kabi just has to run in and try to follow that shit up. It was crazy.
But imagine going from Chachi and Xerxes, who are you can argue all kinds of things about Xerxes, but his team fighting is always really, really good, right? You go from Chachi and Xerxes making room for you to Dardoch and Broken Blade. I mean, like Broken Blade and Dardoch are fantastic players in their own right, but they're not there. They're kind of players who need agency, right? Like you need some people to do the dirty work so they can have freedom, right? And this is why like players who are team reliant can sometimes struggle in North America as well, right? Because you have to make sure that you have these people around you who can create space and that kind of thing. I think this is one of the reasons why you've maybe not seen as many AD carries, import AD carries succeed in North America. Like there's a meme that like no team that imports
Bang was awful for the most part, and he was one of the highest prized AD carries we ever got. There was another Korean AD carry, name escapes me right now, from T1 that joined in maybe season 4, season 5. This guy
better than Faker, some would say.
Yeah, he would say better than Faker, this guy. But man, this guy did not have a good go of it. I mean, he ended up in Academy. He played a couple games, got 9th place, went back to. Yeah, it was rough. But yeah. Anyways, you can continue.
But I mean, like this kind of thing. It's because the people who are there who create space, like creating space on low resources, is incredibly hard to do, right? And it's a skill that people don't really value very highly. But to be able to look good whilst you're on low resource, it's incredibly hard to do, right? And this is one of the reasons why you often see people value supports really, really highly, right? When they're looking to import. It's because that kind of position is really, really hard to execute, and it's not something that you can just go in solo queue and play and learn, right? I had a point about this.
Well, I was just gonna say that this concept right here, it perfectly explains why I value Inspired so highly. Is because I feel like Inspired is like really smart about this stuff, but he's also like really active early game, where normally like you have like these junglers that are in the carry mindset and they're not able to like break out of it. Like they're like trying to 1v9 the game so hard that they don't actually like view themselves as like somebody who should be creating space for their AD carry later on in the game. And one of the things that I haven't been able to really put into words, that I just thought of when you were saying this was like, this is why I think Inspired is so good, is that he's not like I think Selfmade is really good, but Selfmade's pure carry. Like he's not dying for his AD carry, dying for his mid laner, like realizing what crucial CC he needs to eat in order to win a team fight, as well as like Inspired will be like, hey, like I need to fucking eat this ability. I need to like fight in this way in order to like have my AD carry really succeed. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out as something I thought about when you were talking about that.
Yeah, but in mid-jungle duos, often you have one person who provides the stability and one person who provides the flair, right? And the really, really good players can flex both roles, right? This is one of the reasons I value Humanoid so highly, right? Because he when he was with Xerxes was the stability, and he had the ability to flex and like be really aggressive. But when he played with Shadow was the guy who had everything, right? Like Shadow, one of the reasons Shadow looked so good maybe at Worlds he wasn't so good, right? But for the majority of the year, he was like a top 2 jungler.
yeah,
absolutely.
Right? Was because Humanoid provided him the stability. Humanoid went and played, he's an Azir, right? He went and played the Azirs, he went to play the Orianas, just so that Shadow could have the flexibility to do what he wants to do on the map. And it's very rare that you find two-way players are incredibly hard to find, right? Like who can do both roles really, really well. And this is one of the reasons why, even though you could argue that Larson is better than Humanoid, right?
He's always stable.
He's generally stable, right? But this is, and I'm not saying, specialization in a skill is really, really good as well, right? Kobe, again, another example. But you need to have both, right? But I agree with you completely on Inspired, and, finding these guys who are low resource and who can do well, like the threshold to be good if you are high resource is much lower than the threshold to be good if you're low resource. Because, somebody in SoloQ, like imagine you found somebody high up in SoloQ.
Agurin.
Sure.
Agurin's a high.
Agurin.
Agurin, right? He's a high resource solo queue jungler. But
I mean, if you put Agurin on a team with Niski,
maybe it could be good.
Niski, Hillisag,
maybe it could be good, but you're probably gonna go 0-15 some games.
I mean, sure, he's gonna go 0-15, and he's not gonna be the best, like most stable hard carry, right? But if you went and put Agurin on Mad Lions, he would look like utter trash, right? Like, but if you put him on Fnatic, maybe he would look good. I'm not saying no, he wouldn't be better than Selfmade, right? Like Selfmade would be better,
sure.
right? But he would be good if you played around that guy's strengths, right? You have this guy and you play around the strength. And if you want to know why Caps is the best, in my opinion, the best Western players of all time, is that he looks like a high resource player when he's playing low resource. Like Caps always plays low resource on G2. On Fnatic, he played high resource, right? But he looks like he's getting all the resources and all the time, but all he's doing is roaming and getting his side lanes ahead. And it's insane how he can do this whilst always playing low resource, right? So players who can do this are very, very rare, and they're very few and far between.
How do you think a player like Caps would fare in NA, just purely hypothetically? Because something that we discussed earlier was like the idea of like bluffing and understanding what a player can and can't do, and then being able to like play around those edges. But when I look at somebody like Caps, it feels like he's like one of the biggest gamblers when it comes to like, he'll just sack waves to make plays happen, and he'll just go for like crazy plays, and that's what makes him so good in EU. But could that be potentially like a detriment if he played in like a different region where people didn't make the decisions that he expects so often?
Are you putting him on Golden Guardians, or are you putting him on Cloud9? Right? That's the question, right? Like, I mean, if you put him on Golden Guardians, I don't think he would look very good.
Okay.
Because he would be roaming and playing, playing.
He gets Niles ahead, and then Niles dive 15 times, and then
I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna refer to any individual players, but you look.
Oh, like, I will. I mean, that's what I'm here for.
Caps is a flex player and is a very successful flex player, but he's gone more towards low resource the longer his career has gone on, right? Because he knows that this is a way that he can win the most games, right? Because he can play high resource, but lots of people can play high resource, right?
Sure.
Like Humanoid, Larson, like they're almost at the same level, if not at the same level as Caps is. High resource, right? But he knows if I play low resource, these guys can't play low resource as well as me, and somebody else, I'm just going to be able to snowball somebody else. And maybe the Alfari's not in the league anymore. Maybe the Wonder Whipper matchup is really, really close, right? But it won't be close if I play low resource, right? Wonder's just going to smash Whipper because I'm going to be in his lane all the time. And what are Fnatic going to do about it, right?
Yep.
I mean that's the reality. And actually, this is one of the reasons why. I mean, there's you know that Niski started in Fnatic, right?
Yeah, he started in Fnatic Rising.
Long time ago.
Yeah, like 20.
But the reason they picked him up was because he could go even with Caps and he could match Caps, right? Because when Caps was playing low resource, Niski was the only guy who could play low resource at the same level as Caps, right? And this is why Splice, like in 2018 Splice, when we were not very good, like this is the reason why we would always do well against Fnatic, right? We would do really badly against G2, but we would do well against Fnatic, because when Caps played low resource, Niski would just match him. And then Fnatic found a way where they would just make him play higher resource, and then it was harder to win. But you can have these players, right? Who are capable of matching you in certain situations.
Yeah.
That would be, by the way, the ultimate sign as well that like people do just judge based on the nameplates and the context, not what actually happens on the screen. Because, mate, if you put Caps, especially the Caps from like 2 years ago, onto fucking Golden Guardians, dude, he would have some way more egregious games than Jizuki. He would just be feeding in a sideline all the time. Half the time, by the way, probably correctly. Like he'd realize like we're not going to win these team fights. We're just going to lose 3 team fights, lose the game. So why don't I pressure this part of the map? But in NA, that just wouldn't help you, mate. You would just die over and over again. You look like an idiot, you know.
Yeah, but this is the problem, right? Like, firstly, I don't think Caps would have developed into the player that he is now if he was playing in a, because you wouldn't take those risks, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is the bigger issue, right? Like the problem is that sometimes if you're coming up without the right team support around you and you go and take those risks, like how does Niles know whether he's taking a bad risk or not? I mean, like sometimes some of the risks Niles is taking. Some of the risks he is taking are not bad risks. Some of them are. Some of them are really, really bad, and he should never flip it, right? But how can you tell the difference between a risk which is good, that is your team's mistake for not cross mapping it or not defending it properly or not defending it in time, versus a risk that you take which is bad, right? That you shouldn't have taken, and the team, because when both of them are equally bad and you're getting flamed equally hard for both on Reddit, right? Like, I mean, it's hard to do, and this is something where, you know, like it's a responsibility of a coaching staff to come and back him up, right? Yeah, so that's kind of all I would say on that. But you know, the team environment matters a lot, and you know, again, I keep going back to Mystiques because Mystiques is a perfect example of this, right? Sometimes you have to say, do this even if it's bad, right? Like I don't care whether what you're saying is right or not. Do it even if it's bad. And then we'll work on we'll in our one-to-one time, we will spend time focusing on how you can improve as well and other ways that you can think about it, but don't do it on stage, right? Like even if this thing is should be the best way of doing it, right?
Yeah. So another topic that I think we could discuss that I know you have a different opinion on than most is like the amount of North American talent that we actually have here. You know, like on the server, just like people from SoloQ, because, you know, one of the huge, you know, discussions in the community whenever we talk about why NA is doing poorly is always we have high ping, we have low player base, we don't have enough good players. So like that is one of our main reasons. But I know when you came here, you said you were actually surprised. You thought that there actually was a decent amount of good talent out there, and you know, just wasn't being like utilized properly. So like, what is your opinion on North America?
It's fucking rich considering there's only one North American on his entire team. But okay, we'll just put that by the by.
Put that by and by. But actually, I was surprised because in EU, so the EU server is what, like 3 times larger than North America?
Yep.
Okay, but you have 10 teams. You have more than 10 teams scouting all of the top talent in EU, right?
You have all the ERL teams, of course. Yeah,
exactly, the top ERL teams, and they're like scouting talent, and they know how to scout talent, right? Like a team like Big are the best. Big and Mouse are the two, like I can really call out. LFL teams, I don't know too much about LFL. I know a bit about Spain and like
all Germany. You need to know is LDLC not cutting it right now. That's all you need to know about LFL. Ica not having a good time of it this split. That's all I gotta say.
I mean, Ica was an enabler, right? Like he was an enabler on LDLC, and they brought him in expecting him to be a star player in North America. Okay, anyway. Like
with an enabler jungler Nick Smithy, I can't believe that didn't work out. Crazy. Great scouting.
Anyway, I mean, I think in fairness to Ica got flamed to like shit for being put in that situation, right? If he'd been with Dardoch or something, like it would have been great for him. You know, because he's an enabler, right? He's an enabler player, and you put him with like an enabler jungler, and you've got 2 guys who are not doing anything.
He could have been like the next Niski or something. I see the premise.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I mean, he's not as good as Niski, right? But like,
no,
but
he
as
a concept, yeah. Whereas people were looking at him to be a
right?
superstar mid laner. Yeah, exactly.
Because they're like, oh, you've got X Smithy just ganking for you all the time, and Ica's like, sure, I've got this jungler, but what am I going to do with all this pressure? You know, I don't get this. I've never been about that. And that's why I think that lots of people were defending him, like lots of people from Europe who knew what he was doing were defending him, whereas maybe in North America, people just flamed him and they were like, this guy's shit because he can't carry, right? But that's not who he is, right? But anyway.
Well, I just flamed him because like mechanically, I just thought he just wasn't good enough to be playing like a tier 1 league. Like there was times where you know, like you can say enabler, like whatever, but then I would see how he would interact with like his jungler on ganks. I mean, don't make me bring up the Kiana play against
Sure.
Jensen. Like, don't make me bring up the plays.
I'm not going to say that Ica like should have been brought over, right? But I'm going to say that he was put in a hard situation for him, right? Like, and you know, maybe you could argue that wasn't the right player, right? Maybe they should have brought in Leader, right? If you have Xmithy as your jungler, maybe Leader's the guy that you want to sign. Maybe Leader doesn't want to sign for you, right? But like, there's other players you could have signed to be that hard carry player. But anyway, in terms of talent in North America, you are competing with like a lot of different teams, whereas in North America, you're not actually competing with that many teams, right? Like you have you like teams don't care that much about amateur. Maybe things will change this year when their academy teams go and get smashed by all these amateur teams coming up, right? But like they don't care about amateur. They don't scout that much in amateur. So who are you competing with? Are you telling me that, you know, okay, worst case scenario, you have 1/3 of the player base, right? So that means you should have 1/3 of the star players, right? So you're telling me
if it's normally distributed, of course.
Sure, of course. Okay, let's say there's a little bit of variance, right?
Yeah, sure.
But you're telling me there's a humanoid, there's a captain, there's a Larson in the LEC, and there's no humanoid caps or Larson in North America. There's none, nowhere. Like there's not a single. Okay, humanoid caps, Larson, Nemesis, Abadage.
I mean, even
Zarbi,
like
right?
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
Blue, Vethio, we know all the names. Yeah, exactly. Two of these. Yeah,
you're telling me that there's
player. Yes, exactly.
You're telling me that you need to import Diplex, who's like this Diplex, tons of talent, could be a star in the future, right? It's not going to be caps level, but could be a really good player in the future. You're telling me you need to import Diplex? You can't find a better player than Diplex in North America in the entire server? I mean, that's just rubbish, right? It's just complete nonsense. And
what do you say? Like, do you say that? So, what's your interpretation of then the NA mids that we end up having? Like, do you think that because when we see like, you know, like people like Ablaze, Olive, Palafox, Demonte, we see them come up into LCS and they just don't look like they look like everyone else is a cut above them. So do you think that it's just like the players that we're choosing are not right?
What's your theory? What would your proposition be for why this is happening then, Peter? Like, why don't we have an Abadage that comes through? What's the problem, do you think?
The people that look good in academy are the players that don't take risks, right? And like, if you want to be the best player you can possibly be, right, you need to take risks because sure, a Blaze Olive can play like his safe, you know, whatever style in academy, and he'll look really good in academy, and then he'll come and play against Perks, and Perks will destroy him. Right, because because this guy's never bluffing, he's not taking risks, right? And the people that look bad in academy because you know they're taking risks aren't going to get the chance to be promoted, right? Because this fan sentiment will be, oh, this guy entered this game. Oh, I remember that game like 12 months ago, right? Where he entered so hard, right? Like that this guy can't be a good player because he entered in some random game 12 months ago. Who cares, right? Like. Pick a guy, choose, like if he's really aggressive, if he's like, so Niles, I think, is a guy who probably should have just spent a year in academy, like working out when he should take those risks, right? Just had somebody staring at him because he's a high risk, high variance player. I think Niles, like I've talked to Niles about this in the past, and Niles was one of the North American players that I've recommended to EU teams before. You know, I've said, you know, sign this guy. He's like really high
for like
really
a regional league or
player.
something.
He would do really. Yeah, for regional league.
Okay.
And for academy teams in Europe, right?
So what you're saying is you actually knew more about NA talent when you were in EU than most teams know in NA.
Collegiate, exactly. Yeah,
like,
that's nuts.
You actually knew.
I mean, like this guy was collegiate, like same with Firefire. Like Firefire, he was one of the players we were looking at for Mad Academy, in summer in 2020, right? But he couldn't find a team. Like apparently this guy's not good enough to play for an academy team, right? I mean, he in North America.
He's
right?
definitely
like,
good enough.
He didn't get any academy offers. I mean, he's obviously good enough, right? Like, and clearly people are not scouting. Now, I'm really happy to have Jojo. Like, Jojo is like, I'm super excited to work with Jojo, and he's like, he's one of the most hungry people for knowledge that I've ever seen, right? Because he obviously made the transition from Fortnite, so he has the hands. I mean, people in North America like laugh at Fortnite, but you know, all these kids coming up now playing Fortnite, I mean, they're gonna have insane hands.
Oh, the raw mechanics of the building and stuff is way above League of Legends.
Exactly.
What are people talking about? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. It's insane. Give me all these Fortnite kids, you know, like Korea, you know, they were brought up on League of Legends. You know, I'll take people from Fortnite, and you know, let's see how their hands go when they transition, right? But
by the way,
I mean,
what was the point you were saying before? Because I feel like it got lost a bit there. The point you were making actually about Academy was very interesting, because basically, like, if you look at the actual track record, like the most famous example ever, in my opinion, of the failure of Academy is Golden Glue. Because every time he goes back down to Golden Glue to Academy, he's like the fucking MVP of the Academy. Then he comes back into the LCS, and then he's just what you expect. He's just an okay to below average player. So, like, is this a trend you've noticed, like, across the board? Like, basically, the way essentially, if people don't know it, there's actually a principle in business. It's called the Peter principle. It's the that just happens to be irony in this case. The premise goes like this: in the company structure, you will be promoted based on how good you are at the job, right? But the problem is that means logically, eventually, you will be promoted until you are no longer so competent you are promoted. Therefore, you'll be stuck at a job that actually is probably not the one you should do. You should probably be doing the one below where you were amazing at that job. So, like, it sounds like a principle that's happening in Academy, because I've noticed the same thing, mate. The people they always hype me about, like, everyone was telling me in this offseason the Parlor Fox is going to be like the fucking truth and a god, and then I'm the same as Dom. Like, I tune in and it's like, this is just okay. Like, what the hell?
I think Palafox has been the most disappointing player for me, because I feel like he actually wasn't somebody who was getting by just being super safe. Like, I don't think that he fit into that mold. Like, when you look at the way he was playing, like, he was playing Lucian and Akali, and like his Silas was out of this world. Like, he was playing aggressive champions, and he looked different than the stereotypical NA mids. Like, he wasn't just sitting there playing Orianna and Azir and like barely getting advantages. So, like, I don't know what's wrong with Palafox. I don't know if he's just having nerves, but the transition just hasn't been there that I was expecting. He was one of the players I thought was really going to, like, impress, and it just hasn't happened yet.
So I think that's one issue, right? Like, firstly, what you're saying, Thorin, like, the skills you need to look good in Academy are not the same as the skills you need to succeed in LCS. There is overlap. I'm not going to say there's no overlap. There is overlap, but some of the people that people were really hyped about when I came to North America, I talked to like as many people as I possibly could, and I was like, tell me about collegiate, tell me about academy, tell me about amateur, right? I just want to watch all of this and learn all of this. Actually, like, one of the things I used to do a lot was I used to watch like every region I possibly can, right? But now I only watch China and the EU, right? Because all I'm doing is watching NA SoloQ and academy and amateur and collegiate, because I have to learn the region, right? If I'm going to be in here, I have to learn the region. So I'm a bit sad because I've kind of missed out on what is apparently a very fun year in Brazil. But anyway, the thing is that people were hyping me up on certain players. I don't want to call certain players out. I really don't want to, because I don't want to like damage their reputation or anything.
Yeah, sure.
But there were people that were super hyped in academy, and I look at this guy and I look at a guy like Jojo in SoloQ, and I'm like, no, definitely give me Jojo. Like, I mean, for sure. Because I mean, he's going to take a risk, and sometimes it's going to look really, really bad, but he has hands, and there's things. If he was a player who was willing to play more safe, he would be better. He would look better, right? And people would go and value him higher. But he's not willing to do that, and therefore I value that. I value that really highly in an individual player. I will also say that what North America is doing with Proving Grounds is really, really good, and it's going to make a massive difference, right? Because the thing is that if your only entrance into LCS is through academy, okay, and you are a star player in LCS, right? But say you don't get on, okay, so obviously I'm going to talk up EG, so let's forget EG exists, right? But let's say there's only one good academy team, right? Let's say Cloud9 is the only good academy team, or a different team, like there's two good academy teams, and they value a different mid laner over you, right? They want to import a mid laner, or they value a different guy over you, right? Your option is you have to then go and sign for one of the worst academy teams, right? And maybe you go to your academy interview and you go and say what additional support you will get, like on EG, right? All the players on academy and amateur, like I run academy scrims every Monday, right? On my day off, and I watch all of their scrims, right? Like even if they're not live, right? And we give them individual one-to-one feedback from the LCS coaches, right? But you go to a team and maybe you go and talk to a team from a lower table org, and you go and say, what additional support will I get? And they'll say,
none.
Oh, I mean, yeah, sure, none, right?
No, I mean we literally had that. Like we had Revenge on our show like 3 episodes ago or 2 episodes ago, and we asked him, when you were in academy, what support did you get? And he told us that literally the only coaching he got would be like, here, man, watch some LCS scrims and like figure it out yourself. Like that was literally what he told us. So like the support is not there in academy. So I mean this kind of goes into the next question that I was going to ask you, where it's like people always want to like make it seem like, oh, well, even what you said about Niles, right? Like, you're like, oh, you should have spent a year in academy. But the problem is that, like, when players go to academy, they kind of just get, like, they're in purgatory, essentially. Like, they're not, they're just existing there. They're not getting any better. They're not getting, like, or a lot of players aren't getting the proper coaching they need. So they don't actually develop at all. And then, like, they come into LCS and they look completely underdeveloped. So, I mean, the question kind of goes like this, right? Like, every single time that a player comes in, there's always an issue where it's like, oh, well, like, yeah, they did well in academy, but NA academy doesn't matter. And then like, even if it's a player like JoJo, people will talk about him like, oh yeah, he's top 5 in SoloQ, but it's NA SoloQ, you know, like how do you get top, like he played a bunch of Diana to get high rated in NA SoloQ. So it feels like there's always a barrier that, you know, hinders a player from being accepted, whether they like succeed in academy or succeed in SoloQ or amateur or whatever, because like, essentially we just view the quality of the competition not good enough. So like how do you actually, you know, evaluate these players, because when the environment is, you know, so lackluster?
So in my opinion, the single most important person, okay, so on your coaching staff, like the person that I have to rely on as head coach more than anybody else is my academy head coach, right? Mm-hmm. Like the person who is leading my academy project has to teach these guys who are going to develop in the future into players who can become like a key part of the team, right? And how many orgs go out and invest time into their academy coach, right? Like I would say that I spend an average of 3 hours a week working with Matt just on coaching, right? On in-game things. We'll watch VODs together. We'll go and spend a ton of time together, right? More than I'll spend with people like Artemis and Mash, who are like on my main team stuff, right? Because this guy has to be the guy who will develop these guys and will bring them up and will put them in the system that we want to work on, right? And just to finish my last, sorry, I really want to go and talk about the last one because it feeds into this, right? So sure. If you are like a 5-fire, right, and your only choice is to join like the 8th place academy team, what were your choices, right? You had to join that because you will never play LCS unless you go through academy. Then when you go in academy, you're only going to look good if you play passive, right? Because teams don't play appropriately around risk reward. And then you're gonna, let's say you're good, you're still, despite all of this, you're good enough to go to LCS, and then you go to LCS, and then after 4 games where you get smashed, people are like, oh, this guy was never good after all, right? I mean, what are your chances? Like you're playing with like loaded dice, right? You can only I mean, to come out, like you have to be you have to be literally like Vulcan or Blabber.
It's not basically it's not even about how good you are. You have to basically just like, it's like one of those scenes in a movie where the hero has to like dodge an axe coming like this and jump over something. Like it's not just skill, it's luck, isn't it? There's a massive amount of luck, and at the end, unfortunately, even the person who makes it, it's survivorship bias. Like actually they might not have done everything right, they just were the one that made it through the fucking cheese grater, as it were, you know.
And this is why, like, as a coach, so I believe EG have a good program, right? Which is why I think it's fantastic that all of these amateur teams get to compete, right? Because it means that if there's a super talent who's out there that I've missed, sure, go and show me. Like, go and play in this amateur tournament and smash my academy team, right? Smash my amateur team. Show me that I was wrong about you, right? And then I'll go and look at you more seriously in the future, because you miss people, right? Like I watch as many games as I possibly can, but there's tons of people out there that I missed in collegiate, and I don't want them stuck on like some, gotta choose my words here. I don't want them stuck in a place where they're trapped and they have no option, right, to move, and they're just
shithole organization. Okay.
TSM Academy. Yeah. No one wants to see any players on that team. Yeah.
In fairness to TSM, like Tactical and Johnson are both in the league, right?
Oh, they're great at making players for other teams. Yeah, no, it's not for their own fucking team, you know. So,
TSM, they clearly they're clearly a good place to go if you're an AD carry. But anyway, what I will say is that so I want them to be to come and show, and I think that it's fantastic. Like here, and when I see people complain, that an academy team, you have to play on Chicago for proving grounds, right? So there are people saying, it's so unfair. These amateur teams get to play on like 20 ping, whereas we have to play on like 60 ping. It's so unfair. They're going to look so much better, right? and they're not thinking, look at all the resources. You're on an org. You can go and watch LCS scrims. Like, you can go and talk to LCS coaches. You can get like, I mean, you have so much benefit. You have so much advantage, and you're complaining about like 30 ping. Sure, maybe you're going to look worse than them. Maybe you can't 1v1 kill them. Good, out macro them, right? Like, show that you are better. Show, like, if this guy. So I just mentioned people from my academy team, right? But like contracts, like when you tell him, oh, they're going to have 40 ping. Contracts isn't going and saying, oh, they have 40 ping. Oh, I'm so sad. No, he's like, who cares if they have 40 ping? I'm so much better. I'm going to play LCS again, right? Like, I'm just going to smash this guy, even if I have like, even if he has better ping than me, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I'm just going to beat him anyway. It doesn't matter. Who cares, right? Like, bring it on. And this is, I think this is kind of the attitude that I really admire in players, and this is something that I hope that we can create more. And having that other option is really, really good. And this is something which I think has been a big benefit in Europe, right? Like, if you don't like the academy offer which is being offered, you don't think the org is going to support you, you don't think the org is going to promote your career, go and play for Giants, go and play for Big, go and play for, you know,
any of the teams in LFL. Honestly, like, LFL is so big right now.
LFL is stacked because, well, the salaries in LFL are crazy.
By the way, one thing you even alluded to earlier, Peter, and I personally really hope it happens. I actually thought the most obvious person who should have done this in the last few years, fucking Dardoch, is I hope there are actually going to be some NA talents who go to play in the ERLs. Like, to me, it would just make sense. Like, remember, no one really cares about imports in Europe because they're all going to be European teams anyway. It's not even going to be an issue. But instead of just whiling away for 3 years in academy, like some players might, like you say here, 1 year on the right ERL team, mate, some of these guys could turn their whole career around.
Oh,
even coming back to LCS potentially, you know.
And ERLs actually look fun to play in. Like, it doesn't look
awesome.
It doesn't look like oh shit, like I'm playing in an ERL, I'm in a second tier league. Like, LFL is fucking hype. If you can go to LFL, if you can go to the German league, even like the Spanish league gets viewership, like you're getting more eyes on you and you're getting better practice. So like, what is the downside compared to being in NA Academy? It's obviously just going abroad, right? Like, then
for sure.
Like, you're going to a new environment where you're uncomfortable. But I think that it's so much better for your career.
So one of the things which really scares me in North America is people make generalizations based on an individual statement that somebody has said, right? So I want to be really clear. Please do not make generalizations about all NA talent from this, okay? I have spoken to 3 to 4 people from NA about going to EU, leaving aside Niles and Fifi, right? Who are actually players I was trying to sign, right? I've gone and said to them, why don't you go to EU? Right? If you're in this situation, right? They've been contacting me for like coaching or something, right? Why don't you go to EU? And they say, oh, look, the salary is like half or like 60%, right? And I'm just thinking, imagine if you go to EU and you succeed, how like
you're parlay into a bigger salary anyway.
Yeah. In those situations, you just got to back yourself, right? Like, if you
bet on yourself.
Yeah, like, and sure, maybe you miss out on a few years of your career where you could have maybe been stomping people in academy. But imagine what you can get going to EU. Maybe you won't scrim the LEC teams, right? But you could scrim the Turkish teams, you can scrim the Russian teams, you can go and like scrim some of the LFL teams. You can go and play against, go to EU Masters. Go, if you're a mid laner, go and play against Leader. Like, show that you can go and match Leader 1v1 in the Akali versus Irelia matchup. Right, you probably can't, right? But like, maybe you know what I mean, right? Like,
sure.
But what I'm saying is, show that you can do it, and you like think about how many North American teams will want you when you come back, right? You're not just going to have to settle to be on some academy team. The teams will be rolling out the red carpet to come and get you. And you're saying that you can't take a small pay cut in the short term in order to be able to do this? I mean,
I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense.
Even if streaming is your career, go there and stream EU SoloQ, right?
I did it. Yeah. And it's way better. Like, that's the thing is the environment is so much better for like improvement. Like, it was actually crazy to wake up and then like want to play SoloQ. And I haven't had that for years. For years, I had no desire to play. Like, when I was in LCS, I had desire to play, and then the next time I had like desire to just wake up and grind all day was in season 9 when I went with Mo and the boys. Like, it was fun. Like, we'd all wake up and we'd want to fucking play EU SoloQ because the quality is so much higher. Like, the thing that you don't understand, I guess if you're just like coming straight from NA, is how many people are paid to play the game professionally in your games in Europe at any given moment. Like, everyone, like, I would, like, as soon as you hit like even master, grandmaster, 7 out of the 10 players almost every single game are professional League of Legends players. They might not all be in LEC, but they're LFL, or they're in the German league, or they're in the Polish league, or they're in any of they're in the Nordic/UK league, like the Spanish league. There's so many different regional leagues. Even like players, I forget the guy's name. You know who I'm talking about. The Riven One Trick that played in, and there's like a Riven One Trick that played in the Netherlands, I believe, like the Dutch league. I think his name starts with an A or something.
Alois.
Yeah, that guy. Like that. So like this guy, like you might get into a game and be like, oh, this guy's like a challenger Riven One Trick. It's like, oh, he's actually like he's a Riven main, but he also plays on a team as well. So like I don't know, it just feels like the quality is so much higher because so many people are just like dedicated to playing the game for a living. Whereas in NA, you know, there's not that many people. You fucking queue up and it's literally decided by it's decided by like who has like the one trick that is actually like the worst. That's actually what it is. Like I was joking with Perks last night. I'm like, okay, so we're in the same lobby and there's this guy that plays Kindred top. And he plays Kindred top with Ignite every single game. This is like a Grandmaster Challenger game. And the game is decided, Vagan's going to know exactly who I'm talking about. He plays Kindred mid and top. He's in my chat right now. You know that the game is decided by whoever gets this player because his champion's 100% going to get banned and he's not dodging. So it's just going to be like whoever gets this guy is just they're going to get fucking ran down. So like that's how the game feels. It feels like you're trying to dodge bullets in NA solo queue rather than play a game.
In defense of one tricks, at Worlds last year, there was a Fizz One Trick in Chinese solo queue, and if you
Mango Dog, this guy was insane.
You cannot lose. You cannot lose.
He's the best Fizz One Trick in the world. He goes Zanya's first item every game, every matchup. He just wins. That guy's insane.
Yep, and there's like Katarina One Tricks and things like this, but but they'll dodge. Like if you ban their there was this Katarina, I can't remember who, but like insane Katarina.
Oh,
but
I know the guy. He's the one that duoed with Selfmade, right? Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah, my chat respect. If they at least dodge when their champion isn't big, fair play to them. Respect.
I mean, we're done.
That's legit.
I mean, but but sure, exactly. But yeah, back yourself, right? And like maybe it doesn't work, right? Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe you go to EU and you're not good enough, right? Then fine. Maybe you weren't good enough to be at the top of LCS. So what was your career ambition anyway? Was it to go and be like on a bottom feeder team in the league? Right. Yeah, I mean, is that what you want?
I mean, some people just want to like avoid school, you know? It's like their parent, like they're left with the decision, oh, if you play for an academy team, you know, you don't have to go to like school if you get into if you don't end up, your parents are going to force you to go. So a lot of people...
Tyler one's still trying to figure out what he wants to do when he grows up. He's got plenty of time. Whatever.
Jesus.
But I mean, you don't like. What was I going to say? Yeah, but anyway, I don't want to say that all NA talent is like this.
No,
right?
no,
I just
not.
There's like I've spoken to a few people and they've given me this reason. Please do not generalize every North, because I really people do this and it really frustrates. This is something which really frustrates me in North America, right? Like people will generalize everything from the worst.
Let's go into that then, because obviously you made a tweet about this, like it was like within the last day or so, where you said something like that, like there's 10 LCS teams, but if people take a problem or an attitude or an issue and they just apply it as though, well, it's LCS or it's NA, so give us something. What's kind of specifics are you thinking of here? What's triggering you when you say that? Because obviously it does go without saying the structures are very different in all the different teams, the resources, etc. So give us some thoughts. Where we're coming from with this.
So actually, this is something that didn't bother me. It's something I noticed when I moved from EU to NA, right? Like in EU, if somebody makes a mistake, if a team makes a mistake, you flame the team. Maybe you flame the coach, okay. Maybe you flame the GM, maybe you flame the organization, maybe you're flaming the wrong person, right? Like, but you don't flame LEC, right? You flame the individual team, right? In North America, if something goes wrong, you flame the region.
Yep.
And this is so it didn't bother me that much until like a couple of days ago when we were playing in like our amateur team was playing, and we have an AD carrier on our amateur team called Shiro, or used to be called Dan Kaiser, right? He used to be a Kaiser One Trick, but
this guy is so insane. This guy is so insane. I'm telling, I do it with him last year. He's too crazy. Go ahead though.
But he's really young. He's just finishing.
He's the nicest kid too. He's so nice, that kid. Yeah.
he's a good kid. But anyway, like the point is that this guy, the thing which triggered me on this, right? Which these kind of things don't normally trigger me that much, but I remember reading the post game thread where they beaten Golden Guardians Academy, and he like had an MVP performance, and then there was one of the most upvoted comments in the entire thread was somebody saying, it's something like the NA teams don't care about NA talent, so sure he played well, but they're just gonna like hire the next 35-year-old forgiven from Europe or something instead, right?
Okay.
And I mean, this was the individual comment. Like, it was kind of it wasn't a really big deal, right? It's kind of just a straw that broke the camel's back. But here I'm thinking, right? Like, as a coach on EG, we just had like a disgusting loss on Sunday to Dignitas, right? Where we throw the game twice.
Yeah, but Dignitas is a really good team, so you shouldn't feel bad about it. I mean, they're just too good.
I mean, I don't feel bad about it at all in any possible way, despite the fact that we just literally like. Okay. Anyway, we've thrown the game twice, so I'm as a coach, I'm feeling super miserable. There should have been a game. It should have been a game where we kind of secure top 4, but we've lost it, right? And rather than going home and crying about it, things like this, I know that Academy has a really important game on Tuesday, right? So I go and watch Academy Scrims for the rest of the day. Don't take a day off on Monday. Spend all of my time watching Academy Scrims on Monday, right? And then my coaching staff, like Empire NASA, works with the amateur team almost every single day. Kelsey Moser, like, she watches all of this stuff on amateur, scouts all of these things. We have all of these scouting reports, and you're going to tell me that North American teams don't care about, like, every North American team doesn't care about North American talent? Like, when I mean, it's just complete nonsense, right? Like, I mean, there's this whole idea going around. Like, it goes from one end to the other depending on how a certain player does. So right now, it's North American organizations don't care because Dignitas are doing well, right? But sometimes it goes the other way, where there's no NA talent. All NA talent is really, really lazy, things like this, right? But right now we're on the other end, right? Where it's the fault of the orgs, right? And people will say things, all orgs don't care. And it's just really, really unhelpful, right? Because if you get into this mindset where you have things like, NA orgs don't care about NA talent. There's no NA talent. There's no possibility to develop. There's nothing there and things like this.
It's going to become self-fulfilling prophecy, I'm guessing, in the mindset.
Exactly, self-fulfilling prophecy in the mindset. And then it leads to things where people believe that the only way you can succeed is bringing in help from outside, right? Because you can't develop.
Sure.
And to me, it bothers me a lot. So I saw your revenge episode, right? And what I don't understand is you're willing to invest so much money into, like, so EG. I like EG, right? Let's be clear. I really like EG, and I like what EG's long-term project is. But you're telling me that you have a coach who's doing this with your players. There's no way for the players to tell senior, because I mean, obviously, if you're a player and your coach is not coaching you, you're going to tell senior management, right? I mean, I assume you're going to tell senior management. So does that mean that you had no way to tell senior management that this was going on, or did you?
I think people are. I think people are scared. I think people are scared to tell senior management.
I doubt they would even try. Yeah, I think they would just think, "Fuck, my coach doesn't care," and just complain and then lose. Unfortunately.
Okay, so in that case, then you have an environment where players are too afraid to tell you, right? So you don't fix it, or even worse, they're telling you, and then their repercussions.
Just ignoring it or something. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, or even worse, their repercussions. And you're putting all of this investment into players, and you're not investing in your support staff, right? I mean, how are you hiring a good coach, right? Like, I can tell you that I interviewed 22 people for my coaching staff, like for one position for coaching staff this year. And we, like, Matt was somebody who we worked out that we wanted to develop as a coach, like, quite early on, right? But I mean, I feel that I would find a random person from collegiate, and I would invest more time into tracking them down than a lot of teams did for me when they were trying to hire me for their LCS head coaching position, right? And this is for, like, not even like my strategic coach, right? It's like for, like, assistant coach level, like, coaching, like, I would, when I'm interviewing a coach, the interview is a minimum of 2 hours. It's normally like 3 hours. And before we've even done the interview, I've gone and spoke to 3 of your old players, like, some of your old coaching staff or your old boss or something like this. And I know, like, everything about you, right? And if somebody goes into an interview and starts bullshitting me, like, I'll know immediately because I've spoken to your old players, right? But when people interviewed me for a position, they didn't ask me, like, they hadn't talked to many of my old staff. They hadn't talked to my old boss. They hadn't talked to like my old players, or at least none of the players told me, right? So maybe they had, right? They like didn't ask me anything about my in-game knowledge. And it was just really, really, really puzzling, right?
Well, people just assume that it's there, right? They're like, oh, it's Peter Dunn, you know, like he coached Mad Lions, like he got that team of rookies to play well together, like he must know what he's talking about, you know, like that's just the mentality.
And I mean, how do you know that I wasn't carried by Kobe and Humanoid for 3 years?
Exactly.
Right? You don't know, right?
Yeah.
And what happened in EG is, like, with my EG interview, so I firstly I had 3 interviews with EG with separate people, right? But like in the EG, in the one that really mattered with the GM and with Empire, like with who's like the head scout, like I said a throwaway comment, which was kind of a dodgy like throwaway. I just wanted to move on, right? And I put a throwaway comment about something out of the game, and NASA, who Empire, was like straight on it. He was like, "What do you mean by this? Like, what are you saying here? Do you believe this? Do you believe?" And then I had to defend it, and I was like, "Holy shit! This isn't going to be an easy interview. They're like going to challenge me and they're going to push me." And they're not going to take it at face value. And I was like, okay, this is an org I want to be a part of, right? Because they're not going to take it on face value, right? Because you don't know. Right? You have absolutely no idea as an org what I can contribute to your project, right? And you shouldn't take it on reputation, right? It's the most dangerous thing you can possibly do to hire a coach based on reputation. Challenge them, make them sweat, and create a system where if things aren't working, there's a feedback loop, right? Where you can hear about it. And this is why I can't understand why something like the revenge situation is so weird to me. Because if this happened on like Mad Lions or Splice or EG, right, we'd know about it and we would go and take time to fix it, right? If the coach doesn't understand, if the coach is lazy and doesn't care about his players, then why is he coaching, right? Why did you hire this guy in the first place? But if he doesn't, if he like really cares but just doesn't have the game knowledge and doesn't feel in an appropriate position, then spend time, invest in him, like teach him about the game, teach him how to be better, teach him coaching ideas, teach him in-game ideas. So.
I mean, the question would just be like, who is going to be the one that, I think the problem that we end up in is like a lot of these teams, they're created, but like they don't even know like where to start. So like, who's going to be the person interviewing that actually has game knowledge that can challenge like the potential coach? I think that's the issue.
I mean, your head coach, no?
Well, like let's say you're interviewing for a head coach, right? Like, I mean, like for example, like in your case, like who's going to have comparable game knowledge to you to actually test you and be like the barometer for whether like you know what you're talking about or whether you're full of shit.
Sure. That's fair. Then use your players. I mean, like,
that's true.
You've got a player you're going to build around. Then, if you have literally nobody in your organization, then use, like, you must have a player you're planning to build around, right? Because you don't just bring in a new coach with like nobody, right? So get him to interview that guy. And like, you know, don't have it so that your player is like interviewing based on whether he likes this guy or not, right? Like, talk to the player, like, brief the player. If you're GM and you want one of your players to do the interview, you brief the player on what you need to know. Right, and just have him go out and go and do it. If that's your only option, I'm not saying it's a good option, but if it's your only option. But I just want to say that, like, I'm sure not all NA orgs are like this, because again, generalization. Don't want to generalize about the entire region, you know. But like, if maybe this is just a single one-off situation, right? I don't know.
It's not. It's not. From talking to enough players, I mean, unless all players are just like bullshitting me, it's not a one-off situation. I think that it's just like. The way that like academy coaches are even selected, a lot of the times it's just like it's a player that has no coaching experience that, you know, was like played at the pro level at some point and they want to get into coaching and that's just like the first job they get, you know, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But like, how many of these academy coaches do we see is like, I mean, and we don't even know, like they could be really good. Like for example, Moon seems like he's been okay as a coach, you know, like we've heard positive things about him. But I mean, like credentials wise, it's just like they're just thrown right in, and it doesn't seem like there's that much like I guess discerning from like the original coaching staff on who they're choosing. Like it doesn't feel like people really care.
But how do you judge then if somebody's doing a good job, right? Because like let's say you have an academy team with 5 veterans that you basically have to do no coaching with, and then they win the academy league versus somebody that has like 4 rookies and then he a lower table, but the team improves a huge amount. Like,
exactly. So this is what I always say. Like you can't actually do it, right? Like I'm not saying that this is a way to do it, but I'm just saying that this is what people do, right? They take somebody like Moon and they'll see the team's results without the coach, and then if the players like improve, as soon as in some time frame, whatever, like the coach joins and they see improvement within like a semi-short time frame, they just attribute whatever difference there was to the coach, rather than it being like, oh, maybe the players got better together, maybe they like figured out like how each other want to play. Like maybe the players themselves are the ones that grew together and they were able to figure things out. But if there's like a change, they just attribute it to the coach, and that's like how I think people assumed that Moon was a good coach. He took the team was like in 10th place or whatever, and he got them to playoffs. So,
I mean, in fairness, he is improving. CLG are getting better.
Yeah, of course. But then you also look at a team like CLG, right? And it's like you have so many veterans on that team, right? That team is full veterans. Like they should theoretically, without a coach, have good macro. Not saying that they would, but like if you take a bunch of players that have been playing the game, that is supposed to be your strength. Like they're supposed to have the wealth of knowledge and experience to be a decent team. And yeah, like it could be Moon being a good coach. It could be just the players, figuring things out themselves with all their experience. It's hard to say.
But I mean, like, it's okay for fans not to understand what like a coaching staff does, right? Because no, who goes out there and talks about coaching theory, right? Nobody does, right? To be honest, like this is one of the reasons why I like doing shows with you guys so much, right? Because you get to talk a little bit about coaching theory, because nobody talks about this kind of stuff, and we're starting from the wrong place, right? Like people are saying all the time, there's no talent, people don't care about talent, people don't bring up talent, and we're never thinking about what are the structures that you have that will allow talent to thrive. What are the structures you have that allow you to scout talent? What are the, like, if you have an EU team that's caring more like about scouting than an NA team, is that a when there's so much talent in the EU already, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating, right? But all I can say is that, again, this is a plug for EG, but I do like, leaving aside the fact I am employed by EG, right? But leaving aside the fact that I'm employed by EG, you look at all the stuff that EG are doing, like in collegiate. They have a situation where they will literally, if you are working collegiate, or you're interested in collegiate, they will like read your CVs for you. They'll give you like basic tips on coaching. They run seminars. Like the EG management asked me, it's optional, but I do it, right? They asked me to run seminars in the off season to like help rookie coaches coming up, because they understand that if you want to get better, you need to develop your coaching staff, right? You need to have coaching staff. So when you scout the players, you can have them come up as well. And I mean, like, I wish more teams would take this approach, right? But it's, I guess it's hard. I don't know the situation, right? I only know what's going on in EG. But from my perspective, you've got to have these things in place. Otherwise, how can you possibly succeed? You can have like the next, maybe you've discovered a guy that is as good as Faker, right? Mm-hmm. But if he sits in academy, like being taught to play really, really passively and never bluff and things like this, like, I mean,
how do EU teams do it? Like how are EU teams able to like find such good coaching staffs? Is it just because of like the regional leagues and the fact that there are just more coaches there that you're able to like scout them easier based on like there's more players that they've worked with, they're competing actively, so you can like just judge them more harshly? Like is that the reason why we see generally better coaching in the EU, or what is your take on that?
For sure. I mean, like so leave aside LEC and LCS, we'll count them as a wash, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking at in terms of talent development for coaches in EU, your job as an academy coach is very different from your job as, like, say, the coach of SoloFide, right? Like if you're coaching SoloFide, an amateur team in North America,
yes,
right? Or Giants or Big or whatever, like your job as Big is to like win, right? You're not developing talent in the long term, because that talent
you're trying to win prime, like
trying to win. Okay, so this tests a different skill set and develops a different skill set in coaches and allows you to scout coaches for different skill sets, right? You have like some coaches who are famous for talent development, famous for scouting in Europe and things like this. You have some coaches which are really, really good strategic minds, okay? And you can see this judged by the kinds of teams that they build and the kinds of teams that they find success with in the ERLs. And it tests for this, and you have like a live or die situation. Like if I come in and I have no coaching experience at all, right? But I think I know a lot about the game. I can work my way up. I'll try to find a job in the second division British league, or maybe I'll try to work in the Dutch league or one of the Balkans leagues, earning probably nothing, right? Maybe like 100 a month or something, right? And then I'll like work my way up to maybe a top ERL league, right? Maybe like a French league or the German league. And then from there, I try to work my way into LEC. And there's a path for progression. So people invest in it and they invest time in it. And they take it seriously, right? And we talk about one of the big arguments for why it's so important to continue to promote NA talent is that the next generation of talent decides that they want to make playing League of Legends a career instead of going into, Overwatch or Call of Duty or whatever other game like is being competed for, right? It's the same thing with coaches, right? You have to have like a progression, like going up the totem pole, and that's why I think EU kind of develops a lot of these coaches, right? Because they're tested at every stage, and you can fail at any stage, right?
I mean, so I was just going to ask you this. I mean, this is just what I'm thinking about when you're saying this. Do you think that maybe the importing of players doesn't matter as much, but I mean, there's no cap on importing coaches, right? Like there's no like Riot doesn't have any rules about, oh, you can only have like certain amount of like European coaches or anything like that. Do you think that importing coaches could be actually like the more valuable thing than importing players?
So I'm biased because I'm a coach, obviously.
Yeah, sure, but
I think that this kind of thing is important, right? And it's not just about importing coaches, it's about importing the right coaches for your team, right? You shouldn't just, if you have a team full of like free-spirited thinkers, you don't want to import like a disciplinarian Korean. It doesn't matter that they're Korean, okay? The fact is that they're a disciplinarian coach who doesn't speak the same language as them, right? Like that's you have to make sure that you're hiring the right coach for the right team.
I had that. I've had that exact experience with like I had like the disciplinarian coach that knew nothing about the game, but he was supposed to like have a bunch of like football experience. This guy's name was Randy, and he came over and he didn't even know like how like TeamSpeak worked or any of that. So like people would be like muted in like post game conversations and stuff, and he would have no idea. So like I've had like there was a whole phase in North America where we thought that coaches, like analytical coaches and strategic coaches, weren't valuable. Like when I was going to go into season 6, and this is part of the reason I retired, was I was going to go into season 6 and we were going to have no strategic coach. We're going to have somebody stand up on stage with us that wasn't actually a strategic coach, and we're going to have players run all the draft and do all of the strategy ourselves. And all we needed, or what our org said is all we needed was somebody to actually, be the one that actually structures everything and had one-on-ones with the players and made us cohesive. So
the TSM approach. Yeah.
Well, so what? And Woodbuck came in too that year. So what happened was CLG won, and they had a guy named Chris, Coach Chris. There was like the whole story about him, and they won with like somebody who was like a former football coach. So then everyone just decided, we need baseball coaches, football coaches. We don't need anything about the game. We just need the structure from like a proper like education training and things like that. So they just hired people with degrees. So we had this whole phase like in like season 6 of North America where we had a bunch of coaches that had no idea about the game, but they were supposed to like provide the structure we needed to like, elevate our region.
So obviously when you were a pro, Dom, like you were one of the top junglers in NA, right? But like how then, if you have a coach that knows nothing about the game, how can you get better than Score? Like how is that physically? How is that possible? Like, is it just you have to study his VODs?
I mean, I think that it just comes down to like I don't even think that was like the goal. Like I didn't even view it on an individual level. For me, it was like the goal was like how do I make my team to be better than TSM and CLG? Like that was like what I was trying to think about. Like what is happening in the game? And the reason why my mindset was so like macro oriented is like I didn't really care that much about I thought I had good individual performances, but I didn't actually like that wasn't getting us wins, right? And I lost to High in Gauntlet, and High was just known as like the shot calling god. So my mentality was like, yeah, so like if I'm ahead every single game and I'm still losing, clearly like it's more about like the team side, like being able to do all the things that High did. And High was one of my friends, so he was like pretty open with me, but like he like the way that he would tell people, okay, like we need to set up at this time, everyone buy pink wards, drop your pink wards here and here. We want to like being more decisive with like what the team decisions were. Like that's what I thought like I needed to improve on. So I think that my goal was just like trying to like be a better leader in that sense. Like I wasn't really thinking about like, oh, individually, how do I progress? Because, I didn't feel like I felt like maybe that would count later on. It's like maybe I need to be a better individual player when I go international or something, but that wasn't going to help me win in NA, which was the goal.
Yeah, no, I can sympathize with that, but it's just really puzzling because I mean, what you need from a coach, obviously you need a coach who's willing to do one-to-ones with you, but if they're doing one-to-ones and they don't understand what's going on in game, and you do a one-to-one with one player and you say this guy keeps fucking up, and then you go and talk to that player and he says this other guy keeps messing up, how can you tell who's to blame? Mm-hmm. It's the guy that's nicer. I mean,
I guess it's the guy that comes off better in the conversation, the person that you like more. Like that's how you determine it.
I mean, that's so absurd. Like, I mean, I don't
know.
think you can coach without having in-game knowledge, and this is one of the reasons why it's really, really puzzling to me, right? Like, you've got to, you have to have a coach who has in-game knowledge, and you have to have mechanisms to test whether they have in-game knowledge, right? It's just that simple, right? Oh yeah, but yeah, and that goes more for like in academy, it's even more important. Like if your academy coach doesn't have in-game knowledge, like maybe you can survive as a head coach in at LCS level. Like if you have like a lot of veterans and you just enable your veterans to do a lot of the in-game coaching, right? But then what are you hoping for in academy? Right, like I mean, you're
hoping you get lucky. Yeah, you hope you get lucky, and you just end up having really talented players that are just smart enough to figure that shit out themselves. Like if a player's driven enough, like maybe they're the ones that take it upon themselves to like figure out the problems, and maybe they're able to like analyze what their flaws in their own gameplay are. Obviously, it's a lot harder, but I mean, I'm sure there's players out there that can do it.
Yeah. But, I mean, to me, it's really puzzling. To me, this is outside of my ability to comprehend, right? Because obviously, when I've come to NA, this is not what I've experienced. Like my only experience from NA orgs that aren't EG, like when I was doing interviews with them. So it's really puzzling to me because this is not how EG functions, right? And it's not how any org that.
Yeah, well, you have Kelsey, you have even Kelsey Moser on your staff, and like she's somebody that I know for a fact. I mean, I've done LPL live views with her, right? Like she's up watching other regions. She's eating, she's sleeping, she's breathing League of Legends, which I feel like that passion is kind of what's lacking a lot of the time in coaching. Is like it doesn't feel like a lot of the people are super passionate about coaching, or they want to like watch that much League. Like some people just don't enjoy it, right? But they get an opportunity to be a coach, or they did enjoy it before. They get an opportunity to be a coach, and it's like, if no one's gonna come and replace them, they're just gonna take the salary, I guess.
But do something else then. Like, I mean, you're not earning mega bucks.
Yeah,
like I mean, there's more lucrative things you can be doing with your life, right? Like that aren't League of Legends related. Like if you don't enjoy League of Legends, if you don't breathe League of Legends, right? Like, I don't know. It's confusing.
You need the
but
passion.
Anyway, yeah. But I've all I say is that this hasn't been my experience from the players and the coaches and the staff that I've worked with in North America so far. So I think that maybe I've just been lucky, right, to avoid talking to all of these. But to bring it back to what we were discussing at the start, about what was it? Sorry, I had a really good point here. That why in North America is kind of North America doomed. Well, I mean, there's talent there, like it exists, right? And it's a really good time to look for talent, because if nobody else is scouting the talent properly, you can get all the talent you want. And I feel like it's been really free this year in the off season.
By the way, that's the part that never made any sense to me, Peter. Is it can't simultaneously be, wow, look how shit our academy and our coaching staffs are, but there's definitely no talent because we've tapped the whole mine. Like, well, it can't be both, can it? Logically, if you have a terrible academy system and coaching staff, you don't know if you have any fucking talent, because you guys couldn't know talent if it walked in and bashed over the head with a fucking Tom and Jerry style frying pan, would you? You just go, what was that? Was that a bird or something? Like, the point here is, that's why I agree. Like, I agree with the premise you said before. I think you summed it up well. It's not that, listen, yes, we understand they're not going to have a year every single year like ERLs, where it's like, right, you get Larson and Humanoid and Nemesis and Abid. No, just get one. There's got to be one. Like, I'm with you, Peter. There's got to be one Abidog each year. There's got to be one fucking pick whatever player you want, Kazi or something. The point is, at the moment, they wouldn't find it anyway. That guy would just get lost in a collegiate or fucking academy, or he's in SoloQ and doesn't know he can be a pro. Like, but before you can complain about not having any talent, you've got to actually put in the effort and fucking check, like, let's have some falsifiability to this premise.
And I will say that, I mean, I know that North American, some of the North American fans, I've got to be careful not to generalize, some of the North American fans that I've interacted with are not the most patient people, and they're like, oh, everything is doomed, we've got to go and fix things. But, they just changed the amateur system so that you can actually have a second path, so you don't have to go through academy. And the thing is, these kind of things will show for the next couple of years. So I would be shocked if in 2023, 2022, 2022 is a bit close, but by 2023, if there was not a single North American team not making it out of groups, right? Like, I mean, you're going to see players. You are going to see, provided things stay in. Got to pick my words carefully here. Provided things stay in a similar situation to how things are going right now, right? With development, talent development, and rules and things like this, you will see this crop of players who are coming in now. The top players from this will be beginning to make an impact in 2022 and will begin to be some of the new faces of the league in 2023. It was exactly this way in Europe with EU Masters. There was a period in Europe where there was a huge amount of stagnation before Riot EU opened up the system. You had players like, there was one system year in EU where like you had Betsy and you had, holy moly, there was some rough, that was a rough year for mid lane in Europe. Coming in 2017 and 2018, there would there had been a long period of stagnation where the same guys, people like X, have they all retired? I don't want to insult them too much if they're still playing. But people like Exile, people like Betsy and things like this, who were clearly at the end of their careers, right? And no talent was being brought in, and then the EU Master System came in, and then that is what changed everything, right? That's where the humanoids, that's where the Larsons proved themselves, right? And proved that they were better, even though you had that stagnation in EU where people couldn't break through because it was a similar academy system, right? Or no academy system at all. Yeah. And that takes time to happen, but the first step has been made now.
By the way, if people don't realize, because obviously, again, people like to act like, LEC just like naturally occurred like this. No, it was developed like there was a world, the time period when Peter's talking about, when Roccat was importing Profit and Blank, like fucking Korean, like never made it solo laners to fucking Europe. They were importing a never made it mid laner from Korea. Like that shows you like where we were at a few years ago. And now no one would even consider that because there's always 5 guys in ERLs you'd try before you'd import a fucking Korean that never made it, would you? So like people take it for granted. Like there are lessons to be learned for sure that have already been done, even though it'll be applied differently.
Yeah, and like keep the faith, right? Like it's frustrating, but this is the result. Where we are now is not the result of 2021, right? It's a result of 2020, 2019, 2018. Like it's the result of all of this talent development not happening over the past few years, right? Talent development doesn't just come out of magic. Like I can't just magic, kha'zix out of thin air, right? Like kha'zix had 4 years where he was like playing in the ERLs at like a really high level, right? From the age of when he was he legally allowed to play? I don't know, but like the point is he was very, very young in those days. But he it wasn't like he was just randomly out of SoloQ. And those guys need to come in now, and they are coming in now, and they're going to prove it, right? This year, and we'll see how they go, right? Like, I mean, Fire being one who's really making his case, right? Obviously, he's standing out because he's somebody who hasn't really had a shot in the past. But there are others like him. I don't want to go into too many details because I want these players to play for EG and not for another org in North America. But it exists, right? Like they exist, and it's really exciting.
I mean, I think the frustration just comes from just the results and like the time. Like getting out of groups used to be the standard, right? Like teams used to get. I mean, NA used to, like, outside of season 5, I believe we made it out of groups in season 6, season 7, season 8. Up until season 9. So like now I guess obviously it's more difficult to get out of groups with the new system. I mean, there's just more, there's like, before you could get an easy group. Now you can't really get an easy group anymore. Like it doesn't really exist. You're getting a Chinese team and a Korean team in your group no matter what, with the new system. So it's harder now, but I think it's just the frustration for like years of people trying to be hopeful and just not understanding how we got to this point, when theoretically, like, if you look at North America, the results don't match what the investment of resources have been, right? Like if you're investing this much money, you expect to be able to compensate for like the lack of players or whatever the like other issues of North America is.
But it doesn't matter how much money you pay. Like,
you
can't fix like a broken arm overnight, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to like develop, you have to put a plaster around it, and you like, it doesn't matter how much money you spend, right? Mm-hmm. It's about putting the systems in place to make sure that you fix things in the future. Right?
Yep, I agree with that. Absolutely. Well, I know you have a hard out pretty soon for review before Scrim. So I mean, this is where we normally open it up. Is there any topic that you thought we were going to discuss on the show, or that you wanted to discuss that we didn't hit on? I know we spent most of the time on coaching and development, trying to get everything. But if there's anything, you could always hit us with something that we could cover real quickly in like the last couple minutes.
I'm afraid nothing that I can cover in 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. Sure.
But just all I would say is, don't assume that everyone, like, because it's very easy when people are looking in from the outside and they see, okay, North America hasn't had success in a long time, and then there's all these stories about negative stories about things. Don't assume that everybody who is in North America only cares about making a quick buck, right? Like, don't assume that people don't care about the scene, aren't there willing to develop it, aren't willing to put the investment in, right? Because those people do exist and they are trying hard, right? So don't just automatically assume that just because Reggie goes and says something like imports, or whatever he's doing on Twitter, right? That like every org and every staff and every org feels the same way. That's all I would say.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate you being here as always. It's always a fucking good conversation. Hopefully we covered everything. That's probably one of the most in-depth discussions on coaching that's going to be publicly available in a long time. So appreciate you being here as always, taking time out of your busy day doing amateur and academy and LCS in order to talk to us. So yeah, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Crackdown.